not that, this. Hi, I'm Stephen Carson. This is my wife, Heather Carson.
Good morning.
We also go by Radical Liberation and mrs-radlib. Okay, so as I said in the marketing materials, my wife wrote an article 20 years ago.
Gosh, it's hard to believe it's been that long.
Yeah. It was really fun to have someone chime in on Twitter and say, I remember reading that article. Mm-hmm. Anyway, wait a second. Okay. Keep an eye on that and make sure everything's looking good to them.
All right.
Once it shows up. Anyway, this is, I would say, a sort of a sequel to that article. So that article was called The Evil of Dating, and it talked about our shift independently from each other to go from sort of modern dating to try to do something more traditional. You know, I mean, it wasn't that traditional, but it was more. We tried to move in the right direction, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm nervous because this is still not shown up.
Okay.
Okay, wait a sec. Let me try this. Sorry, just
we're
making
coordinating all kinds of
making sure we're
technical
on
things.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay,
very good.
Okay. I just couldn't see that we were there.
All right.
I'm gonna mute that.
We need an IT guy working behind the scenes for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're good there. All right. Okay, so anyway, so that article was in part focusing on the downsides of modern dating, and we'll touch on that. But the theme of this show today is really about courtship, and that means how to think about this in a more traditional way, a more healthy, constructive way, I think. Just a better way. So I wanted to make an introductory comment before we really get into the meat of things. And people said 5-hour stream. It could easily be. We have a ton of material. Anyway, we
have too many young children for that.
Yeah, but we can't do that. So we're going to do our best here and cover a lot. Okay, so one thing, just I want to try to calm things down on this topic. One of the things we noticed was that when Heather published that Evil of Dating article, I'd been writing for LouRockwell.com. It was published on LouRockwell.com. I'd been writing for LouRockwell.com quite a bit. Heather had written a couple articles. That might have been her first. But anyway, Heather wrote a couple articles. That Evil of Dating article by far got the biggest response of anything either of us ever wrote. People, huge threads were going on some site.
I forget the name of it.
Yeah, I forget. It was a prominent site at the time, and huge discussion kicked off there. People were emailing Heather. What was interesting, they continued to email Heather for years.
Years later.
Because her email address is in the article. So people just continued to send her questions. So,
and from all different perspectives as
Yeah,
well.
all over the place.
I had 40-something women who were, committed feminists who were just so bitter and obviously in anguish over their decision to commit to their careers, and now they're alone and they have no children, and then there were other people who were much younger who were just really wrestling with the chaotic ways that dating was going on at the time, and still is. It's, as far as I can see, it's worse now than it was then. So the responses were amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
So main point is it really touched a nerve. And one of the things that has been a theme in our thinking, and I think Heather's going to touch on this later in some of the reading she's been doing, is that one of the issues, strangely, we talk about marriage, sort of the death of marriage and stuff like that. But one of the things that's interesting is that there's a lot of weight on marriage actually right now.
Yeah.
Actually, there's historically more weight on marriage than it usually would have been the case. So actually part of the purpose of our discussion today is, to guide our thinking into a different direction, but also just to kind of lower the temperature. So I want to make an introductory remark from a Christian perspective to help with that. These are the words of Jesus. He said, "The people of this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are considered worthy of taking part in the age to come and in the resurrection from the dead will neither marry nor be given in marriage. So unlike Edgar Allan Poe, whose poetry I really love, who saw, love is eternal, romantic love is eternal and all that stuff. It isn't. Actually, marriage is something given to us in this age, right? In this earth. And so it's not for eternity. And so ultimately, if you take the long view, which Christians try to do,
a very long view,
you're going to be okay, whether you're married or not, or you're in a bad marriage. I think we need to reduce the pressure around this. We need to let off some of the steam around this issue, and orient ourselves to values that aren't so dependent on, how we're being esteemed by the opposite sex and that sort of thing, right? Those are obviously important things, and they're a big part of our lives, but they're not ultimate things, right? At their best, they guide us toward ultimate things. And the scriptures talk about that marriage can be a place, can be and should be an institution which increases holiness in the people involved in the marriage, right? So marriage becomes a sort of a conduit, a journey towards something else. But marriage itself is not sort of an ultimate end, right? Okay, so having made that introductory comment, just try to put marriage in its place and coupling and all that stuff in its place, which we do think is really important, right? And we are in a crisis, I think. But let's calm down a bit. So what was courtship? And the definition is from this book. You want to go ahead and flash it?
Yeah, this is a really interesting book. It's called Wing to Wing, Oar to Oar.
Yeah, I'm going to hold it.
Yeah, you're going to hold it up. And the definition of courtship is very simple. It's to woo with a view toward marriage.
Big thick book.
Yeah, and it's the introduction is nice and meaty and good, and then the rest of it is just selections of writings from various authors and poets, and everything from Greek philosophers to the Bible to Pride and Prejudice. There's a whole section on that in there. So it's really fun. But basically, courtship was to woo with a view toward marriage. There was no courtship without marriage as the goal. And typically, families were very much involved. There wasn't a lot of pressure for each spouse to be each other's soulmate and end all be all, but there was an understanding that there should be at least a minimal amount of attraction to each other. Their personalities would be compatible. I mean, families wanted the marriages to stick,
Yeah, right.
This was to be a permanent thing in terms of, till death do us part, in that sense of being permanent here on the earth. And so typically parents were involved, elders in the community were involved in helping to, set people up with each other. And then they would supervise the courtship process,
Now, we'll talk about this more later, but one of the things that's clear to me is that in our times, already the way we're talking is going to cause some people to bristle, because we live in, a democratic age, but a hyper-individualist age, right?
Very much so.
And the whole notion that who you marry would, not come purely from the inner part of your inner soul spontaneously, and take into account other factors, really rubs our current age wrong.
Yeah.
But I think the traditional view has a lot of wisdom in it, and I hope as we go through you'll see that, which is that we aren't just sort of pure individuals who have no family and no culture and no religion, and that's not what we are. We are a bundle of things, and contexts, and so the more traditional view involved taking those things into account in part, and that's real.
Yeah.
Right? That's reality.
Well, and also marriages had a lot more support. With, nowadays, a husband and wife are sort of their own little thing unto themselves. The nuclear family is very separated from the other generations. In the past, generations might all, there might be numerous generations in a home together. And so
Right.
marriage was very public. There was a lot of community support to keeping the marriage together. And these days, it seems like marriages are kind of unto themselves.
Right.
And there's not a lot of community support, and there's a lot more pressure put on your spouse. Your spouse is supposed to be your soulmate. You're supposed to be romantically attracted to them. You're supposed to be sexually attracted to them. You're supposed to be best friends. There's all this, this pressure.
It's too much. It's too much.
Well, yeah. And you might feel all those things for your spouse, but maybe not all the time, so.
Okay. So, why courtship? Okay, so first let's hopefully it'll be more clear as we go through sort of the stages of courtship and some of the history and stuff. But real quick thoughts on why would you do courtship instead of the modern approach? And the main theme here, I think, is what are you preparing for prior to getting married, right? What are you setting yourself up for? It goes back to Aristotle, right? But all the great wisdom traditions teach the importance of habit, of what you habituate yourself to, right? So what does modern dating habituate you to? And by contrast, what is courtship meant to habituate you to? So in courtship, the point is that you're preparing for marriage.
Right.
You're investing in and this is not just for courtship, just prior to marriage. You're meant to be investing in parts of yourself that pay off down the line if you were to get married. Okay. And here's an example that immediately is going to be controversial. You don't want to have sex with anyone that offers sex to you. Right now, why would that? Even though it's fun to have sex, why would this be a good idea? Well, it pays off when you're married, because you don't have STDs, right? You don't already have children from previous relationships. But I think this is, in a way, the most important aspect of this. You don't have a habit of jumping into bed with anyone you feel attracted to, right? So what are you habituating yourself to in your behavior, right? Are you setting yourself up so that, if you look back at how you've behaved over the years with the opposite sex or whatever, is the habit you're building up that I feel attracted to someone, we feel a spark, boom, we're in bed. Okay, well, how's that going to play out once you're married?
Right.
I mean, you're setting yourself up for trouble.
And you will feel attracted to other people.
Right.
Just because you're married to your spouse. I mean, you're going to see other people out there and you're going to think, oh, wow, he or she is really beautiful or, attractive. But doesn't mean you're going to go toward that person. Right.
So the habit you're building up in practicing what's the word for it? Fidelity. Well, yeah, right. So fidelity is something we think of as something that happens in marriage, but really it's a virtue that you develop before marriage, right? And what the virtue is, well, to be blunt, to not be an animal, right? To not go from attraction, arrow, sex, right? Like boom. Just like unthinkingly,
Fidelity now.
Right. So you need to practice fidelity actually prior to marriage.
Yeah.
And of course, modern dating is not oriented that way at all.
No, not at all.
And so courtship, the tradition of courtship is one where you are practicing fidelity when you're not pursuing someone in a courtship. And this is the part that's really weird for people. Really a shift. Even during the process of courtship, there are aspects of it that have to do with continuing that virtue of fidelity, right? And ideally demonstrating to the potential partner your character, right?
Absolutely.
You are someone who is self-controlled. You're attracted to this other person. You want to be with them. You're trying to pursue them for marriage, right? And yet you demonstrate that you can control yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a signal that is really important, right?
Absolutely.
For the long-term relationship.
Right. Well, and just to go further with the, why should we even talk about courtship now? What I've been hearing from young people, and what I was witnessing, if you've read my article on the evils of dating, what I witnessed when I was in college and I was serving as a resident advisor for the dorms, is that the dating scene right now is very unsatisfying. People are, but they don't see that there's an alternative. I think the language of courtship and the idea that there would be boundaries around our interactions with the opposite sex, feel outdated and feel sort of uber traditional. And but there's this dissatisfaction with things now, and yet people just really don't know what to do about it. And so what I'm suggesting is that there is something you can do about it. You can practice courtship and set some boundaries around your interactions with others. And so we're going to outline some of that here. And
so we're going to talk very briefly about how did we get to where we are, because a lot of the practices that we're going to be talking about none of the practices we're talking about are novel. Mm-hmm. We're literally just, return to tradition is what we'll be doing. So that brings the obvious question. Well, okay, but what happened to those practices? How did we get to where we are today?
Yeah.
And I just want to make a meta comment real quick. This channel, except for the Mrs-Radlib streams, this channel discusses history and politics and economics. Mm-hmm. There's a pattern. I just find I'm having deja vu because I say this over and over again. I'll be like, everything was this way until the early 20th century, the late 19th century. Mm-hmm. It's like Murray Rothbard said, abolish the 20th century. The century of, mass murder and world wars and so forth, right? Well, it's been a disaster in so many ways, but also in our personal lives, right? And in regards to society and marriage and dating and courtship, right? Yeah. So I just have to call out that I keep seeing this pattern. A lot of bad stuff happened about 100 years or so ago. And I think what I see with a lot of my friends in my political friends and stuff, conservative traditionalist types, is that they are considering ways to not exactly rewind, but find a different way forward that doesn't involve just continuing to do what hasn't worked for the last 80 to 100 years. Right. So when did dating start? Well, it's 2022, and this is going to shock you. It started 100 years ago. Yeah,
it absolutely did. Yeah.
Talk about that.
I was going to put together a nice little timeline, but with 8 kids, I just didn't have time this week. So basically, what happened is right around the turn of the century, we had the Industrial Revolution. We had a lot of people, young people in particular, coming into the cities, and there was a concentration of younger people in the cities. And you had young people living together in apartments. And, in the past, courtship involved maybe sitting on the porch. There might, talking to your prospective mate. And there might be a parent there supervising. There might be an older sibling there supervising the talking, but it was very public. You were not in private spaces. There might be, if you were maybe a little wealthier, you might have a parlor, a room that you would receive people in, and you would sit in that room, and then a parent, typically the mother or an older sibling, would be there supervising your talking together. So when the Industrial Revolution happened and you had this concentration of young people in cities, you suddenly had, 2 or 3 young women living in an apartment together. They're sharing the expenses. They didn't have a room or a porch to receive people. And so what evolved was they would go out on dates with these men. And a couple things in my reading stood out to me. Sometimes the women had an expectation that they would be shown a good time. And this would be very costly for the men, and they would be spending a good portion of their salary to take these women out. And there was a crackdown from uber conservative people that even involved the police, where they were likening this practice of dating to prostitution. And they were like, arresting women, because basically they were saying that these women were not just going out with these men, that they were actually providing sex for these men. So from there, you had the 20s, the roaring 20s, you know, sexual revolution and dating.
Oh,
was,
yeah. So Red
alive
Hawk,
and well.
Red Hawk has an excellent comment here, and
Oh.
I want to expand on that. He says the sexual revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race.
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely.
But here's the part that a lot of people don't realize about the history. We think of the sexual revolution as the 60s, but it's more complicated than that, because there was actually a sexual revolution going on starting in the 20s and 30s. Now, those who know German history, this is going to not sound so crazy, right? Because we know about the Weimar Republic, and we know that that was insanely degenerate. And that was about 100 years ago in that post-World War I era, right? So what happened is that the sexual revolution was really kicking off in the West, very seriously in the Weimar Republic, but also in the United States. I know this because we talked to our grandmothers mostly. I remember it coming from the grandmothers. The grandfathers didn't really comment, but anyway, we talked to our grandmothers, those who were actually, you know, of like dating age during that era, and they told us what was going on.
Mine didn't. You
Oh,
heard from
really?
yours? Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought that you heard some things from your grandma. Anyway, my grandmother talked to me about this. And so what happened is World War II. World War II came along, and the sexual revolution was sort of put on hold.
Yeah.
Because of the war. And then there's the post-war era where we had,
there was an extreme shortage of men. And
right, there's that.
Well, yeah. And so what ended up happening, actually, the trend with marriage, actually, people were marrying a lot younger post-war.
Post-war World War II. Okay.
World War II, yes.
Right. So that kind of that would have nipped in the bud. That would have nipped in the bud the sexual revolution kind of stuff, because people were just getting married instead of dating around.
Right. And then you had the baby boom. And then, of course, the 60s.
And then the 60s. So it's important to understand the 60s as part two. You know, that basically the sexual revolution starts, it gets put on hold, and then it takes up again in the 60s.
Right. Absolutely. So from there, I think we know, you know, that the dating just continued and continued to get worse and worse in terms of these days you have people getting into bed together almost immediately as soon as they meet, and then, you know, they might not even go out on an actual date. They might just sleep together a few times, and then that's the it, you know, that's the end of it. Anyway.
So in other words, what are we trying to say by saying it gets worse? We mean that the structures that our society had in place to help guide us towards coupling, successful coupling, you know, they took a blast in the pre-World War II era. Then kind of people hadn't lost it, right? They hadn't forgotten what the older ways of doing things were. So in the post-World War II era, you have something more like a little bit of a return to something like older ways of doing things. And then with the sexual revolution part two in the 60s, finally just complete destruction, until now people growing up wouldn't even know what courtship means or have any idea that there's any other way to do things. So the structures are just lost. The parents don't even remember anything, right? So there's not like, well, this dating kind of feels like it's not going well, I'll just do the other thing now. There is no other thing now. It's gone. It's literally culturally forgotten. And anytime anything like that is portrayed in the movies, it seems to be portrayed negatively. Okay, so courtship. Let's go to what courtship is.
So I really love the definition that the authors of Wing to Wing, Oar to Oar put together. You know, the initial definition, wooing with a view toward marriage, but they really expanded it to finding and winning the right one for marriage. And so we're going to actually break down courtship into those parts: finding, winning the right one for marriage. And then Stephen added a section called waiting.
But I have added something.
So we're gonna share a little bit of our personal
because I think this is really important. So I went through a shift, and Heather's article discusses this, that both of us went through a shift in terms of how we were doing things. And so before I say all this, I feel like it's important to emphasize that what she and I are about to share right now is not really us as a couple. We're gonna do a little rewind here, and we're gonna share some decisions we made, how we thought about those decisions, why we made those decisions, and what we felt about those before we had any. To some degree, we didn't even know each other.
Right.
In my case, I literally did not know Heather when I made these decisions. In Heather's case, she'd met me, but I was not a factor in her life at that point. So we both independently made the decision to stop dating, to stop the modern dating practice. But we had been dating before. So I look back, and I was with one woman after another for about 9 years. And sometimes I was spinning plates, as Red Hawk delicately puts it, as our friend Red Hawk puts it. And then I decided to stop. Now, why did I decide to stop? And I think what's really important is to share what I felt like during those 9 years and what I felt like after. Okay. So there's a couple things to say here. Well, one is that it was not fun anymore. And as I look back, it never was really that fun. I found as I think about, at the time, I remember I was looking back and I was like, man, I've just been on like this frantic, crazy merry-go-round, and it's not been fun. It's felt bad. I've felt frantic and anxious, and bringing in the spiritual perspective, I felt like I was trying to control things in an inappropriate way, instead of having faith. Now, I know people who are not of faith, this is going to be a hard one to grasp, but I'm going to do my best to express this. I wanted to be in a relationship. I wanted to ultimately be married, and I was trying to like make that happen. Okay. I was going to find the woman for me. I was going to maybe try to make a woman be the woman for me, even though it wasn't really making sense. To give an example, one of my longtime girlfriends was not even a Christian. So, try to imagine me marrying someone, being 20 years married to someone who didn't even share that with me. Right. Any sensible person would have, and a few people did, would have said to me, this doesn't seem like this is really a match that makes sense. Right. But I was like, we'll make it work somehow, So there was this sort of willfulness that I look back and I saw. And so what happened when I stopped is that I let go. I stopped trying to control things. I stopped trying to like make things happen. To some degree, I even, I had to sort of die to the idea that I would get married, because the mode I was in before is I will make sure I'm married. I will make sure I find a woman,
come
even if
high
it's
water.
even if it's not ideal situation, I'm going to just make it happen.
Right.
Well, I got to a place where I'm like, okay, this is not working. It's leading me into danger. I need to let go of that, and even let go of the idea that I will certainly get married, and change my focus. So how did my focus change? I changed, I would say, from like an outward focus to an inward focus is maybe one way to put it. Or another way to put it is I switched from looking for a match to trying to become a good match. I mean, I remember consciously thinking this. I mean, this was 96. So, long time ago now. But I remember consciously thinking, I can't really control other people, right? Specifically women. I can't really control them. I can control myself, right? So I can be, I can try to become the person who would be a good match for the woman I would like, for the marriage I would like to have, right? I would like to become my part of that, my half of that. The other half of it, I don't think I'm going to be able to do much about. I'm going to have to let go. Let go and let God, as some people say. And that was literally my decision, was I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop dating. I'm going to stop pursuing women, basically. And I'm going to trust that the Lord is going to work it out. Now, here's the amazing part. So I stopped dating, if I'm getting it right, in early 96. I might be wrong. It might have been early 97, which would make this story even more amazing. But let's call it early 96. I think that's right. Now, in summer 97, I met Heather. So that would have been a year and a half later after I made this decision. Now, bear in mind, when we tell this story, we did not start courting until 2001, you know, like, 4 years later. So meeting Heather did not put me back into dating mode or anything like that at all. I met her. I thought she was attractive, but I was in my mode of, you know, I'm not dating, you know. And there's even a further story that will hopefully slip in when I did consider pursuing her shortly after meeting her. But anyway, never mind that. So I met her, and as far as I knew, I just was focused on you know, as I said, focused on myself and not dating for several years after that.
Right.
I don't think I heard the other part of the story until after Heather and I were married. I think I'm not sure. I'm not sure you ever told me this until after we were married. I don't remember you telling me, you know, as part of our courtship, or it would have been weird, right? In a way.
Totally.
But think of the timing. So I had been trying to make it happen, right? And then finally I stopped and I was like, Lord, I can't, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to trust you. I'm going to wait on you. Okay. Let me have Heather tell you what happened. And I'm going to cry. So I'm going to have Heather tell you what happened when we met a year and a half after I decided to stop dating and let go of the idea that I'm going to make it happen.
Right. Can I add a little bit more to the story? Well, maybe, I don't know, but.
Well, I'm just telling my story in a way, and then you're going to tell your story.
Okay. So in 96, I was forced into what I now see as a little bit of a, I don't want to say pilgrimage. What is it when you go away? A hermitage. So I ended up spending a summer in this very rural community, and I knew no one. And it was the summer between my undergrad and graduate work. And it became a very quiet summer. I could feel myself kind of settling down inside. And I was starting to yearn for spiritual things, something spiritual. And I had been just in survival mode for years at this point. I am one of these people whose parents told me at 18, without any warning, you're 18 now, pay rent or leave. And the leaving was, you know, go to college or whatever. And I was given no support with that, no financial anything, not even toothpaste. I was just very suddenly cut off. And so that being thrown into the deep end of adulthood was very stressful. And I just spent those 4 years just doing my own version of spinning plates. And I was dating at different points. And when summer of 96 came around, I had graduated, and then I was homeless. And my philosophy professor ended up making up some job for me in this very rural community where she was on the historical society board. And so I was there by myself, and I just remember really spending a lot of time thinking and spending a lot of time just yearning for spiritual things. So that January of 97, I ended up starting graduate school, and I met Stephen's sister. And later that spring and late summer, she invited me to come to her church. Now, I had only ever been to church at a Catholic church, and very infrequently at that. And so my only exposure to the gospel was through the Catholic Church. And I was given the gospel at the Catholic Church, but I was not a believer in any sense of the term. But I came to this church, and I remember being introduced to Stephen. And I remember, and by that point, his sister had been witnessing to me, and I had been asking a lot of questions about God and everything. And so we're at church, and I remember meeting Stephen, and I remember kind of looking up at him and kind of studying his face and thinking, he's handsome in this sort of unconventional way, And then I walked around and sat down in the pew, and then I looked back at him, and I heard a whisper in my ear, one word, and it was husband. Husband. And I went, oh, that was weird. And then I didn't say anything. I just sort of tucked that into my heart and went about my business. So
look what happened. I stopped. I waited on the Lord, and he brought a beautiful woman right into my life and whispered husband in her ear. So my point is, God is real. Is what I'm trying to say. I trusted the Lord, and he came through. Excuse us just a moment. We're muted.
From the cats. Okay, we'll have to deal with it after. Just close the door.
There's still cats in there. It's also pooping all over everything.
Okay, we'll deal with it, Lauren. Okay.
Sorry.
We live on a farm, and we're having a minor emergency, I guess you might say. There's a wild animal in our bedroom. So we'll deal with it afterwards. But anyway, so I was not a believer at the time either. So
that was, that is really the point I wanted to make, is that I waited, and a couple things happened, right? I changed my own attitude and what I was focusing on, and started, building my thing, right? And then I think it freed the Lord up to bring someone along to me, right? It put me in a state of readiness, and I opened the door for God to act, right? Because while I was trying to control everything, I was not available to what God had for me.
Yeah.
I was trying to arrange things for myself, and I was making some pretty bad arrangements, pretty scary in some cases.
Yeah.
So that was sort of the big point I wanted to make there. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to say from my story, and then I want you to tell a little bit more of your story.
Okay.
Just on the to borrow the phrase from Field of Dreams, if you build it, she will come, right? That is the attitude I shifted to.
Yeah.
Except that I couldn't guarantee, and I let go of the idea of being able to guarantee that she would come. But otherwise, the point was, I will stop focusing on finding, and I will get into working on myself, build myself, right?
Right.
Oh yeah, and one other thing I wanted to say from this, thinking about the different, energy or feeling that I had in these two modes, in the dating mode versus the waiting mode. I went from frantic and anxious to calm, from outward focused to inner focused, from looking for a match to trying to become a good match. And this is interesting. Being in that frantic mode was not preparing me for what it was like to be married. Dating was not preparing me for marriage. Okay. Because what it felt like to be in dating world, as I explained, was frantic and anxious. What it feels like to be married to Heather is that I feel calm and peaceful and safe. Okay. So when I stopped dating and I shifted to waiting and trusting God, I was in a different emotional place. I started to calm down. By the way, there was a transition that I meant to mention. When I stopped dating, got out of that last relationship, I was so depressed for half a year. And it wasn't even just because that one relationship. I look back now, I realize it was because of just the whole 9 years and just leaving that. It had such an emotional impact that after 6 months, I remember I'd go over to my friends Arnie and Donna, and I'd lay on their floor and pour my feelings out, for 6 months. And I think I was truly depressed, because at the end of that 6 months, I actually remember waking up one morning. It was a really striking experience. Never had it before or since. I remember waking up one morning and I felt like somebody had turned the lights up. Like I realized that literally for 6 months, the lighting of the world seemed dimmer to me. Like the whole world seemed dim,
Wow.
And then after that 6 months was over, after I went through that transition out of dating, basically, the lights went up and I was like, and I started to be in a different frame of mind. My point being that prepared me more for the emotional place I would be married to my wife, as opposed to the emotional place I'd been going through different relationships and so forth. Okay, so you, at one point, just to kick you off, you said to me when explaining about this period of your life, you got to a point where you said, my picker was broken.
My picker.
So talk about that.
Before I talk about that, I just want to clarify about the wild animal, because there's a comment about it. It's a blue jay. So it's not a bobcat. We're not like, our children are not going to be torn to shreds while we're streaming. It's just
bobcat. So yeah, someone said bobcat. Actually,
we do have bobcat.
We have seen a bobcat,
we do, but it's okay.
It's not in the house.
It's just a blue jay, and it'll be fine. And I'll change the sheets on the bed, or I don't know. So it's interesting. I was in a relationship still when I came to church. I hadn't seen this person.
When we first met.
When we first met, I hadn't seen this person because he was in a different state. But we were still talking on the phone, and it was kind of up in the air what was going to happen with this relationship. And so I met Stephen in, I guess, early spring, summer.
Mid-97.
I know. And then his sister invited me to a Christian music festival in July of 97. And again, I guess I hadn't fully understood that I had been on a spiritual journey already for a year. All that kind of came into sharp focus once I gave my life to Christ. So I remember, and it was so perfect for me to go to a hippie Christian commune and give my life to Christ there, because my parents were hippies. And so that just kind of felt normal for me, And so I did, I gave my life to Christ, and it was like everything just kind of stopped and got quiet and very much shifted for me. And I realized within a few weeks, I thought, oh no, I can't continue in this relationship that I'm in, number one. Number two, I don't think I'm supposed to be dating anyone at all. And so I geared myself up to have the conversation of, I can't continue in a relationship with you, and here's why. And I had the conversation, and it was received well, and I felt this relief and this release, like I need to turn away from what I have been doing. And I guess what I meant when I said my picker was broken is that without at risk of sounding too sort of pop psychology, I was raised in a home with rampant alcoholism and violence. And to not go into too much detail, I'll just say that the sexual revolution was alive and well and rampant as well in my household. And so the examples that I had did not teach me how to respect myself, how to have other people respect me. And I found that I was choosing men that did not respect me. And I was either just kind of a pretty face to be used and abused, or I picked men who just were not emotionally available. And sometimes those went hand in hand.
I love what we have in the notes here. You thought, is all I'm good for is to be used because I'm pretty, and you mentioned this wasn't just guys. So mention how girls would use you.
It was sad to say, but I would have friends that would say, Heather, why don't you come out with us and you'll help us attract guys, like I was bait. And so on the one hand, that felt sort of affirming in a worldly way, right?
Right,
Oh,
right.
okay, I'm pretty and I'm being
pretty, yeah,
recognized
yeah.
for being pretty. But in another way, that's all I was being seen as. And so for a while, I didn't know how to manage that. I felt like maybe that would be enough for me to just be this pretty face and I don't need anything more. And part of that was a self-defense. Part of that was, I'm not going to need anything more. I'm going to make myself be a person who won't need any more. But the truth is that I did need more. I needed a lot more, in fact. And so I remember after I broke off the relationship and really doubled down my focus, I very quickly had a test of that from a Christian guy who came at me with the same kind of energy and ferocity that non-Christian guys were coming at me with. And it was an immediate test. And I was a new believer. And I remember it put me into just this profound feeling of grief. I remember I went through this profound period of grief, and I was able to advocate for myself in a way that I never had before and stop the assault that was coming at me from this Christian guy. And I remember thinking, I didn't think Christian men were supposed to behave this way, but that was a real eye opener for me. And I would just want to share with you the verse that the Lord gave me, which I hope I'll be able to get through without crying, but it ministered to me in such a profound, deep way. And it solidified my relationship with God in a way that helped safeguard me until I was ready to be married. Okay. It's from Isaiah 54. Do not be afraid. You will not be put to shame. Do not fear disgrace. You will not be humiliated. You will forget the shame of your youth and remember no more the reproach of your widowhood. Now, I was not a widow. For your maker is your husband. The Lord Almighty is his name. The Holy One of Israel is your Redeemer. He is called the God of all the earth. So it goes on, but the verse that really that stuck with me and that I clung to was, your maker is your husband. And I thought, okay, God is my husband now. And so I'm just going to cling to him. And what I went through, and Stephen can tell you, because I began attending the same church as Stephen, I would just come to church and I would just cry and just weep and grieve and grieve and grieve and grieve. And I needed that time in order to fully let go of the false beliefs about myself and just really let go of this idea that my picker's broken. In other words, there's just something faulty with me, that I'm not going to be able to choose somebody for myself that is going to respect me and honor me and love me, So I don't know if there's any more you want me to share about that, but
yeah, things might come up. I wanted you to share, shouldn't name him, I guess, but share a story about someone that you ended up advising while you were single.
Yeah,
because I think it fits into this whole thing of waiting and how important. I call it waiting, but really it's building yourself, right?
Right,
becoming your own, doing your own, becoming your own thing, right?
Yeah,
yeah. So one of our friends who we dearly love, is really grew up as a hippie. He's older than us, He really grew up as a hippie. Wonderful guy, but like we're all dealing with in an age of chaos, right?
Right.
And so he's, I guess, did it come up because he was pursuing you, or just because he was talking about how he wanted to get married?
I mean, his pursuit of me was very brief, just, hey, do you want to go out? And I was like, no. And, we laughed about it or whatever. And I said, I'm just really not. I'm
right. But really, how did you guys end up talking about this topic of?
Well, we became good friends, he and I, and really fun guy, really wonderful guy, probably one of the kindest, most loving, compassionate people I've ever met. Anyway, he was complaining about the fact that he was not married. Right. And so this ended up. He was older, by then. Yeah, and I had been a Christian for a couple of years by now, and so he was complaining he wasn't married, and finally we had a very straightforward discussion, which was me saying, look, man, your house is a mess. Your car is a mess. You pick me up for Bible study and you're on E, and I'm like sitting there going, are we going to run out of gas? You're behaving in ways that do not demonstrate that you're ready to have a wife, anyway, we had numerous discussions about this, and something just clicked, and he just basically got his stuff together. And I'm telling you what, I remember going to his house, and I think we were doing recording or something. I don't know. I sang, and we were doing some recording, and it was like he was making all these changes, and I'm like, wow, this is looking good, man. And within the year, he was engaged.
Right.
And it was like, if you build it, she will come, you know?
Right.
And they're still married, and she's a lovely, amazing, talented artist, and
but
perfect fit for him.
You basically prodded him to shift his focus.
Yeah.
That's why I thought the story was interesting. And that segues nicely into the qualities of a man, qualities of a woman, which are useful regardless of whether you're married or not, but particularly in this context of courtship and marriage, which Heather was prodding our friend on, right? So qualities in a man: trustworthy, right? Unshakable, practical adult behavior. This is what Heather was like, dude, you know, and you've got to read that line there, Heather. I want you to say that.
Make your bed, or you'll be the only one in it. Okay. I mean, come on.
Yeah. So, you know, just, you know, a man should, some guys get crazy with this, but a man should have reasonable grooming, and, you know, he should have self-respect and take care of himself. Because, you know, you're worth being taken.
Clean up after yourself.
You're worth being taken care of. And how you take, my dad always had this great line. You know, Jesus said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And my dad would say, if some people did unto others as they would have them do unto them, do unto their neighbors. I'm sorry, if some people would have their neighbors love.
Do you
I'm
need to
getting
think
it
this
wrong.
through in your head?
You say it.
I don't know what you're trying to say.
Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself.
Yes.
And my dad said, if some people love their neighbors as themselves, their neighbors would be in mortal danger.
Oh, that was it. That was
right,
it.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
His dad had all these great lines that he.
And anyway, so you know, it's important to take care of yourself, show respect for yourself. It's not selfish or something like that.
No.
It is the foundation for being able to take care of others. You know, a person who is calm, respects themselves, treats themselves well, not in an arrogant or selfish way, but just treats themselves as a you know, a person made by God, right? They're in a better position. They have the habits to then take care of a wife and children and or whatever, you know.
Right.
So that's the kind of behavior.
Practical adult behavior.
Practical adult behavior. Yeah. Heather had a great suggestion. She said, think of for men, young men, think of a dad you admire and think about his qualities and cultivate those in yourselves. How do you cultivate a quality? Well, we've been talking all about this all along. Your habits, right?
Yeah.
What are you doing? You know,
start small. Make your bed every morning.
Right.
Pick up your clothes off the floor. You know, I mean, I'm not saying be perfect, but get into the habit of doing the dishes regularly and just I don't know. I just act like an adult.
Yeah. Don't be a slob and you know, make good decisions, build a track record that you feel is good.
Notice that we're not focusing on qualities that are romantic in nature.
Right.
Okay. Because you know what? It's interesting. Someone recommended this book to me in the Mrs-Radlib Discord channel.
Yeah. By the way, we have a Heather has a channel. It's linked in the video description. And our experience from the Evil of Dating article prophesies that there will be more questions and more discussion than we can possibly handle in our stream this morning. But there's an outlet for that. Look at the video description, pop into that Discord, join in, and you can ask Heather questions there. And she's been really, really kind to
So I was amazed. This book was recommended and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. And we had already done a lot of our notes for the talk. We don't do a script. We just do like bullet points and stuff. And I'm like reading this book going, oh my gosh, she's like saying the stuff that we were already planning to say in the book. But this is the book, The Defining Decade, Why Your 20s Matter and How to Make the Most of Them. And, you know, she talks about the qualities, they did surveys and the qualities that people are looking for in a spouse. And it's really amazingly practical. I mean, of course, there's, physical attraction is certainly one of them, but I'm amazed at just how, is he trustworthy? Is he, is the man, does he do what he says he's going to do? Is he reliable? Is he honest? And one of them that came up regularly, has he had a ton of sexual partners?
Mm.
Because that was a deal breaker for some women,
Mm-hmm.
so it may not be a deal breaker for all women, but it is for some. So, you need to think about, a woman is looking for a man who can be honest and trustworthy and faithful and reliable, and start practicing those things now. So.
Okay, so and then let's talk about qualities in a woman, and then
Yeah.
we'll get past the waiting,
The
and building
waiting.
yourself part.
You've been waiting through the
talk-
waiting with us.
And talk about finding
Yeah.
and winning and so forth.
Yeah.
So
So
qualities in a woman,
Yeah.
good character. This was a big part of what I saw in Heather as we moved towards courting and marriage. I could see that she was solid. She was, how do I explain it? I mean, you guys probably know by now who, you watch Mrs. Radlib streams and stuff. I don't have to spell it out too much, but just some things I remember thinking about, or how I would describe what I saw in her. Heather was not a gossip. She seemed to have she seemed to be like centered, right? She wasn't just like bouncing all over the place with, trendiness and faddishness. And then some other things that we mentioned that are qualities in a woman, and we're drawing from Proverbs 31,
Yeah.
which is really interesting to look at.
it's actually very practical.
Yeah, it's super practical.
Yeah.
And it talks about a woman there that is not lazy.
Mm-mm.
She has hustle.
She's an entrepreneur.
She's entrepreneurial. She manages money well.
Mm-hmm.
Why would it be important for a woman to have money skills? We always emphasize, the man should be the provider and all that, right? Classic traditionalist thing. Well, what about the woman? Well, money is a huge tension in marriages. It's one of the top things that cause problems in marriages. So you want a man who's a good provider, and you want a woman who manages money well, right?
And this is something we talked about when we were recording, by the way. We talked about who would be the provider, and all these things. We talked about all this stuff while we were recording.
So not lazy, has hustle, hospitable. That used to be recognized as a huge virtue.
Absolutely.
She puts on a good dinner or event or party, right? That is a great skill. And then
It doesn't have to be that either. Just when people come to your home, that you're offering them. Some people don't realize that you should offer people a drink.
Yeah.
Would you like some water? Would you like tea? When we had a couple of Russian individuals come to our home one afternoon, and I just happened to know these two people from different areas of my life, and I thought, oh, let's bring them together. But I researched ahead of time, what should I provide food and drink wise? And tea was the thing. Now we're not tea drinkers around here really, but I made sure to have the tea flowing the whole time, because that was a way that I could be hospitable to, culturally speaking to these folks. So, it doesn't have to be like a fancy dinner. It can just be general hospitality.
And then, of course, and should have put this under both, we would think that a relationship with the Lord is really critical.
But keep in mind, marriage was given to all men.
No, that's true.
For us, being Christians and having a relationship with the Lord is very, very important. But we're not trying to say, hey, if you're not a Christian, you this isn't for you. Marriage was given to all men.
That's true.
So,
right.
All right. So now we're going to get into the meat of the definition: finding, winning the right one.
And the right one, or
right one.
Or fit.
We already know marriage is the end goal, but finding, winning, and are the right one.
Right. So finding. Okay. So the love at first sight thing is not exactly wisdom. It's sort of unwisdom, right? The idea that you'll just know is not.
Now, can
really
I just
reality.
say something?
Yeah.
We know a couple, the Hancocks. They knew each other exactly 2 weeks, and then they just knew, and they got married, and they're still married.
Yeah,
How long have they been married? 50 years?
Yeah, right.
I mean, but again, that's unusual. And I believe them, because I've talked to them about this, and I believe them that they just knew.
Right.
And they have been married all this time. So I'm not trying to disparage that. I mean, but I don't think it's the norm, shall we say.
I think in general, it's not reality that you'll just know. You need to think clearly about what you want.
Right.
Right. Because again, this thing of just, hey, I feel a zing with this person. That's not necessarily a great basis for a life together.
I want to just say, look, it's okay. Let's say you're in your early 20s And people, the general thing is, hey, you're young, you should be having a good time, you should be playing the field. It's okay to take this seriously. Okay. I mean, don't think that you're going
It's
to,
your life.
right. And, don't think that you're going to spend your 20s being partying and being wild. And then you're going to hit 28 and 29 and go, oh crap, I kind of want to be married, when you've not been spending any of your 20s preparing for that.
Right.
So it's okay to take this seriously. It's okay to reject the idea that, you need to be dating a bazillion people before you decide. I think that you can be thinking about what you want. You can be thinking about that. What do you want in a spouse? I actually wrote a list.
You did?
Yes, I did. And I wrote it in my journal and shared it with the Lord, and I'm like, well, it can be revised, but these are the things I want,
Right. So hopefully you see what we're trying to drive towards is a thoughtful approach, a considered approach.
Right. Indecisiveness is a decision, people. So if you want to do a slippery slope all through your 20s and not even think about what you want, but then that's a decision that you're making. So,
okay. Well, now we're telling our story as well as we go through this. So wanted to mention this part of it in terms of how the finding worked for us. An interesting thing that happened, we both stopped dating, right? I actually tried courting a woman in England, and that didn't go anywhere. But I would not call it dating because the way I conducted myself was just completely different from the years of dating. And I, practiced fidelity, right? Like I didn't feel embarrassed about my behavior. I just thought, well, let's see if this goes somewhere, and it didn't.
Right. There was no wins factor afterwards.
Yeah, right. And
going, oh boy,
we didn't get overly involved with each other or anything like that. We just talked and tried to figure out if this was the way it was going to go, and it wasn't. But anyway, so in those years of not dating, as it got close to the time that we started courtship, we actually had a couple people. I think initiate. I don't think you and I started these conversations. People came to us and said, hey, have you thought about, Stephen or Heather or whatever, depending on who they were talking to.
Yeah.
One was someone who had been very close to my parents from when he was young. He'd been mentored by my parents. And then he was a mentor to me and played a role in Heather's life. He came to me and said, you should really consider Heather. And I got to pause and tell this story real quick. I have a friend named Art, my music buddy. One of the things I did in those years of being single, I love music, and he and I would go to concerts every weekend for a couple of years. And we would drive down to New Orleans together. And Art was a very, very quiet person.
Very.
Yeah, Heather knows him. He was very quiet. And at first, I was used to a very talkative family, and so it threw me. And eventually I was like, asked him questions and stuff and realized that he just was okay being quiet. It wasn't an awkward silence. He was just comfortable being quiet. So much so that one time I did an experiment on one of our trips to New Orleans, which is 10 hours of driving, but more like, 13 hours with stops and eating and stuff. We actually went to New Orleans and didn't speak to each other at all. What we did is we played music for each other. We each brought boxes of CDs, that music we wanted to share with each other, and we were just playing music. And he didn't need to talk. And so we didn't talk. So that's how quiet he was. So I say all that to say that when Art said to me, Stephen, have you considered Heather? It really had an impact. I was like, that got my attention,
So
and then my mother spoke to Heather, right?
Yeah, it
And
wasn't
then a
like a big
pastor's
talking
wife.
to or anything.
No,
She
no.
just mentioned you in passing, about, Stephen. I forgot what she said. But
Yeah. But she indicated you should think about, and then a pastor's wife who you were close to also said something. To you.
Yeah.
So what's happening here
Yeah.
is, and this is going to be a scary word, everybody, put on your big boy pants. We were getting a little taste of the ancient practice of arranged marriage.
Yeah.
Or maybe a
Matchmaking.
better way to put it is family involved marriage, right?
Church family.
In this case, yeah. The people who love you, care for you, have a long-term view of your life. They want what's good for you in the long term. can be guides and advisors in this area.
Right.
I would say nothing is probably more frightening to our democratic individualist age than the notion of arranged marriage. It was interesting. We have some very good friends from South India, where arranged marriage is still, it's kind of starting to die, but it's still a practice to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked them what it was actually like, because we don't know what it's like. We just have a caricature, right? And it was not as bad when they talked about it.
Yeah.
I said, well, so the family just, I had the caricature in my mind, right? The family just like makes you marry someone. They're like, what? No. they look for people who are a good, compatible and
Right.
have a good
Yeah.
reputation.
They
and all
want
that
the
stuff.
marriages to last.
Yeah, they're
people.
trying to make good marriages, right? And then they sort of present this person to you,
Mhm.
and before you would even like meet them or anything, the young person can go, yeah, no,
Right.
I don't like how they look. I'm not interested. Not for me,
Mhm.
So of course there are some forced marriage practices that in the world that I think are not good, but I think the traditional practice of so-called arranged marriage, the reason it's lasted so long is because it did take people's feelings into account. It was not we do sort of pure individualist
Mm-hmm.
matchmaking. We imagine that the alternative is just you have no choice and it's just forced on you. But I think the reality is that it was a balance.
Right.
It was a balance between the individual and their own tastes and who they're attracted to.
Right.
I mean, obviously
Right.
that's part of it, but also considering the larger context and
Mhm.
and just taking into account the wisdom.
Right.
It's like yeah, he's a hot guy, but he's really just disaster. He fails at everything. He's not a good provider. And back before people became foolish, they would go, oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, but he's hot and I'm sexually attracted to him. Therefore, all the other things will work themselves out. No, they won't.
No, they won't. Yeah,
they don't.
They
when
don't.
the rubber meets the road, you need someone that you can rely on. Well, I
Right.
want to just give some practical advice with regard to finding. Okay.
Yeah.
In this book that I already mentioned, the Defining Decade, she says, she's going through some of the criteria of what people are, lists of common deal breakers and things like that, things that people want. And, they're disheveled or unclean and they're not taking care of their appearance, lazy. But one of the things that came up was distance. Okay. And she says here, regardless of conceptions of romantic love, your one and only typically lives within driving distance. Okay. So I think, I one of the questions that was asked of me quite a bit at the conference we went to a few months ago was about dating apps and, finding people on dating apps. And you know what? I think dating apps are really interesting because honestly, the dating apps are doing the screening process that typically your family and community were doing for you in the past, right? So I think that there must be some kind of a deep down desire for people to be screened for you. Like there seems to be, I don't know. The whole idea of a dating app kind of gives me a sense of hope that people are really wanting a screening process, but there's just nobody in their life that they can look to provide that for them.
It's all broken down.
It's all broken down. So I think that, but I think with regard to finding, knowing what you want is really, really important, and taking the process seriously and beginning to practice the qualities that would make you a good spouse. Doing those things ahead of time and are really going to help toward the process. And then you can seek out elders in your life, seek out people in your life and just say, look, I know this may sound weird to you, but I'm really wanting someone in my life who can help me choose a good spouse. Then you might be surprised, of the people who are like, oh, really? Okay. And, can you meet this person with me? That you can say, can I bring you along to meet this person and just tell me what you think? I actually had friends do that. Say, Heather, can you come along and meet this person? And there was at least one of these cases where I came away from the meeting and I was like, oh, I am really not feeling good about this guy. You need to break it off immediately. And eventually she did break it off. And it was a really scary, bad situation. And it was a really good thing that she involved people. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, if this goes forward, I'm going to have to do the thing that you see in movies where the pastor says, if there is anyone in this church who does not agree with, I'm like, if I have any integrity at all, I'm gonna have to stand up and say that.
Right.
So, if you have someone in your life, even if it isn't someone who's really older than you, involve them in the process and involve them in finding the right one, because you'd be surprised about how other people think of you, and just say, hey, what do you think would be a good match for me? And get some honest feedback about yourself from others. And if they say, hey, you know what, you're kind of a slob, I mean, take that feedback as being loving and constructive, and then make some changes,
Right.
So I wish there was more we could say about finding.
Well, I'm just going to mention one other thing, which is that some people will talk about settling. And I don't think that's a great idea. I remember reading in Reader's Digest, of all places, they interviewed people who had really long lasting marriages, and they found a theme. They asked them all kinds of questions, trying to figure out, what's the secret, right? And one of the big themes that came out of it is that each one felt that they were really lucky to be with their spouse. Like, kind of like they both felt like they were marrying up, so to speak. They were really like, I have scored. I have gotten a great person here to be my spouse. This is so awesome.
Yeah.
And I that's how I feel about Heather. And I think that is, I think that is what you should be looking for ideally. I mean, it feels idealistic, but I think it's right.
Well, let me just add this one last thing to the finding. Settling down isn't settling. Okay. You don't have to settle in terms of, finding the right person. Don't do the indecisive, slippery slope of sleeping with someone, then cohabitating with them. And then suddenly you're like, well, what are we doing here? We should probably just get married. And I think people are just sort of sliding into marriage. And let me just tell you something. Okay. I'm sure maybe some of you have heard of the cohabitation effect. Cohabitating, this sort of slippery slope into living together, and that's somehow going to lead to marriage. There are numerous studies to support that cohabitation does not lead to a long-lasting marriage. It just doesn't. Trying each other out does not equal a marriage that will stick. It just doesn't.
Right, which seems counterintuitive.
If it did, we'd have that research by now, because it's been being done fairly regularly since the 70s.
It seems counterintuitive, right? You'd think, well, we'll sort of practice living together, and that'll mean that we've sort of validated that it's a good thing to be together and all that stuff, but it doesn't work that way for some reason.
Yeah, it just doesn't.
Okay,
maybe you'll be the one to do the research on that. I don't know.
Okay, so
winning.
Let's talk about wooing
and winning,
or winning. We've talked about this already. You have to know yourself and what you want in a spouse. This is great, Heather. Talk about this. The common misconception that you should put your best foot forward. What's wrong with that?
Oh, well,
because in a way it sounds like that's what we're saying in terms of, take care of your grooming and all that stuff. Right. But I think what we're saying there is more be someone.
Yeah. I'm not saying fake it.
Yeah. We're talking about who you are and what your habits are over time, as opposed to you have all these bad habits and then you go on a date and you put on a show for a moment that you can't maintain even for a couple days.
Right. Well, I think when you go out on a date with somebody, or when you're meeting someone, you certainly want to put your best foot forward. But you can do that in such a way that you're not really being honest about who you are.
Right.
Okay. I mean, I am not a wallflower. Okay. I like to talk and laugh, and Stephen's family is very talkative. And I remember going to a dinner over there, and I was just like, oh, this is amazing. Cause like my family just doesn't like that, and I remember he and his mom had a conversation about me, which he later told me after I left. They're like, man, she's more Carson than Carson. Like she really fits in with our family,
Right.
But if I had just sat there all nervous and kind of not said anything, then that just wouldn't have worked. I needed to be myself, but I made sure that I was well groomed,
this reminds me of the other thing, which is that men would regularly give you the feedback that you were like you're really serious, aren't you?
You're so intense.
You're so intense,
I got that. Oh, as soon as the guy would say that to me, you're really intense, aren't you? And I'd be like, yep. And then I'd turn away like we're done. Look, it's true. Okay. I'm a passionate person. I am kind of feisty, and I will, if I disagree with you, I will say so, but I'm also thoughtful and I like to think deeply about things. And so these are things I know about myself. And
Right.
these are qualities that I was bringing to the table that I needed somebody who would appreciate those things about
Right.
me. So
you shouldn't be tricking someone into being your mate, right? That is not a great long-term plan.
no,
I mean, and in fact, I think part of the difference between dating and courtship. Dating can really be like, especially for men, it can just be like, what do I have to do to bed this woman? Well, if that's what you're going to do, okay. But when you're courtship minded, you're thinking about who you are and sustainable relationship, right? And a sustainable relationship is not built on deceit. It's obvious to say, right?
Maybe it isn't. Maybe it's good that you said that.
So you don't want to present an image of yourself that you can't sustain long term.
Right.
In fact, by the way, it was really interesting, the feedback that was given to me in that courtship that didn't work out. She said,
this is really telling you.
She said, you really, I'm paraphrasing here, but she said something like, you like really know who you are.
Yeah.
You're like, you are, you know what you're about.
Yeah.
And that's not what I want. And then later she got married, and I knew her through mutual friends, and I asked them, so I'm just curious, what kind of relationship did she end up in? And they said, well, she married a man that's much younger than her that she could like control and dominate. And I was like, there you go. She wanted someone she could dominate, and she could see that was not going to happen with me.
That's cool that she knew that.
But we
that's what
figured
she
it out.
wanted,
We figured it out. Yeah.
And you didn't get entangled with each other in a dysfunctional or unhealthy way, before
okay.
figuring that out.
I think we covered a lot of the practical issues: hygiene, how do you dress,
show self-respect,
clean clothing.
Are you picking her up with an empty tank of gas? I don't know why that bothers me.
Yeah. Well, okay. I think the point is that it's a man should be conveying a sense of safety, stability, as opposed to flying by the seat of the pants. Right. I don't know. I'm sure there's some couple out there that they're both like that and they love it. But I think in general, women don't.
You made a comment to me.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just will say that I am from a working class family neighborhood. Okay. There were times where we were going to churches asking for food. There were times when utilities were being shut off. And again, this was in part because of the dysfunction that was going on with my parents. But it was really scary for me. And I remember early in our courtship, you made this sort of offhand comment, like, when is some woman going to appreciate the fact that I make really good money and I have a good job? And inside myself, I was like, I appreciate it, because I'm like, I am not going back to that.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe that seems, I'm not a gold digger. Okay?
Right. But you didn't want a life of instability and insecurity.
I'm saying she a gold digger.
Well, you didn't want a life of instability and insecurity, and that is I would say that is 99%.
That was important to
99% of the time, that is very typical for women. Like I said, I'm sure there's some couple out there where they're hippies and they just drive around and they never know what's going to happen the next day.
Cool, that's cool.
And that's awesome for them.
But that was not cool for me.
But most women want solidity in their life.
Yeah.
Because and I realized we didn't put this in our notes. Okay, quick reality check. What happens when you get married? Well, ideally you have children. What happens to a woman when she gets pregnant and has a baby? She's vulnerable. A woman is vulnerable. She is not going to be able to keep working, though it's amazing how many women try to work through the whole thing almost. She's not going to be able to keep working. She's going to need to have a man who can be keeping her safe and keeping her provided while she's in a vulnerable state and there's a new life to take care of. And that's the highest priority for the woman. So a lot of the dynamics of this stuff come down to what the woman needs when she's nesting, right? When she's pregnant and she's got a new baby. You really need to be keeping that in mind, I think, both men and women. Even if the woman has a great job and all that, that's awesome. But you need to be able to figure out, okay, but what's going to happen if we get married and we have a baby? How's it going to play out?
What if there are complications? What if what if she's on bed rest?
She's on bed rest. She can't work for half a year.
Right. And then again, we're not making a statement against women working outside the home. Okay. That's a personal decision it's just thinking with about your partnership.
It's as adults considering the reality of having babies and how is that going to work out for you
So
too?
how does this
Right.
pertain to winning and wooing? Okay,
Right.
I knew what I wanted. Okay, I knew that when and if I had children, because we didn't know if we were going to be a fertile couple, I wanted to stay home with my children. So I wanted a man who would be the provider and who would be comfortable with that, because it's a sacrifice for him too. Okay, with me not working, it's all on him. Okay, so
Right.
it's a two-way thing here.
Yeah,
okay?
I mean,
So-
we drive used cars, and we always have.
We make decisions that will,
and et cetera, right? We
yeah, because we have one income.
we have values, and we put those above
Yeah.
certain things that other people really privilege, which is basically, I know couples where the man would rather spend a bunch of money on his
Mhm.
fun than on like supporting children.
Right. So his having a good job was a way of wooing me.
Right.
My ears were perked up. Okay.
Right.
And perhaps me saying, I want to be a mother who is with my children,
Yeah.
that wooed him,
That's true.
because that's what he wanted. And
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So even though that might turn some people off, that was me. That was me having integrity, going, this is what I want. And if you're not on board with that, then we're not a good, we may as well just stop now. Okay. Because
Okay.
yeah.
I'm going to run through a little bit of this
Yeah.
practical stuff, and then I want to talk about why you shouldn't use sex for wooing. Okay. Right. You'll win some over with your awesome sex. Let's talk about how that's not a good idea. But real quick thoughts. Okay. Right. Hygiene. We talked about that. Bad eating habits.
Oh boy.
Sometimes you just
Do you
weren't
slurp?
you just
Do you
weren't
chew
taught
with your
the thing.
mouth open?
Oh, and by the way, we are in such. I love how Academic Agent, not known for his kind and compassionate demeanor, but I love how he put something one time. Someone was going after one of our friends, and he said, "Look, we are all coming out of the ashes right now."
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, quit it with the judging each other, right?
Yeah.
So if you just are missing some points on some etiquette and stuff, and you're a little embarrassed because you should have been taught this as a child, and for whatever reason you weren't, dude, we're all missing stuff at this
Oh,
point.
yeah.
We're in such a disastrous place as a civilization, as a society.
And we'll
Don't be embarrassed. I mean,
Yeah.
literally go take an etiquette class or pick up a book or just ask a friend.
Yeah.
Hey, no one ever really taught me like which is the right fork to use for things. I mean, whatever it is.
don't be embarrassed.
Yeah, don't be embarrassed.
Just ask.
Just part of being grown up is not being embarrassed that you're missing stuff, and just being able to say, I don't know about this, and I think I should.
Yeah.
How do I learn this?
Have the humility.
Would
you know
you
what?
help me?
When you grow up, you have humility.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's part of maturing, is having the recognizing that you have deficits and that you need
Yeah.
to work on things. That's
Right.
part of being a grown up. So
Right. So be genuine.
Mhm.
These things are all noticed.
this is really important.
Signal the future you intend to provide.
Whatever that may be. I intended to provide a future where I was homeschooling and being home with any children that we would have. That was
Right.
my intention.
Right. Let's give counterexamples are helpful. So give the counterexample if it's okay, because you're not naming names, so you can share the story, right, from your counseling. The couple where
Oh, that was so sad.
yeah, go ahead.
You know, don't look at each other as projects. This is not a way to woo.
Yeah, so
to win a spouse.
share the story.
So I did have a client who came in having marital troubles, and I, said, what brings you in? And this person said that their spouse did not want children. And I said, okay. And I said, and you do want children? And the person said, yes, I do want children. And I said, well, so how was this talked about before you were married? And the person said, well, they said they didn't want children. And I said, okay, so now where do things stand now? And she said, well, I thought that he would change his mind.
And he didn't.
He didn't. So he signaled the future that he intended to provide, and she just didn't believe him.
Right.
So in the words of Maya Angelou, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time.
Right.
Do not look at your potential mate as a project.
Right.
Okay. It's you can give constructive feedback, but if they don't take that feedback and do something with it, then move on.
Yeah.
Move on.
You do grow together in your marriage, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But you need to have some baseline
Yeah.
agreement on values and what your future would look like together and stuff. That just has to be done. And it shouldn't be mature enough to not be embarrassed to talk about practical things
Right.
like, do you want to have children?
Mhm.
Do you want to have a lot of children?
Mhm.
Share the things that are on your heart that are going to
Mhm.
matter to you,
Mhm.
that for you would be a happy life. In fact, that might be a great heuristic, is just to think, what would be a happy life for me?
Mhm.
What would I really like to see? Where would I like to be 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 40 years from now? Do I want to be surrounded by a lot of grandchildren? Do I want to be, the top CEO of the world with no children? I mean,
Mhm.
whatever it is,
Right.
be honest with your heart, figure it out for yourself, and then be clear and honest about it
Right.
with anyone you would court, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so okay, I'm going to skip this for now.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, so don't use sex for wooing. Why, Heather?
You're putting that on me. Okay. Well, it puts the cart before the horse. I mean, sexual attraction is a good thing. Sex is from the Lord. Sex is fun. But it can and does cloud your judgment.
Yeah.
It can bring surprise children when you're not ready. Sex, with this whole slip sliding into cohabitation thing, okay, it gives you the feeling of being married on a physical and emotional level before you're married on other levels, before you even know if you're the right fit. How
Right.
many times have you yourself or known somebody who is living with somebody, but they're fighting constantly? They don't even really like each other, but because they're already sharing a pet and rent, it just seems like the next thing to do to get married, and they are really not a good fit. And
Right.
let's say they go ahead and go forward with the marriage, and thousands of dollars are spent on a wedding, and 5 years later they're divorced.
Yeah.
So remember, cohabitation and getting sexually involved is not a good way to win or woo a spouse. Okay, because remember, courtship is with a view toward marriage. Okay, so if you're shacking up with lots of different people, and that's that's what you want to do with your life, you want to sleep around, you want to have as many sexual partners as you want, and then you have received your reward.
Yeah.
Okay, because that is it. That is the end goal.
Yeah.
That is
that's your ultimate end.
That's your ultimate end. Then you've already hit your end.
Right.
Okay, there is no further from that.
Right.
Okay, and we already know, secular researchers know, that cohabitating is not a good way to have a marriage. Okay, so
it doesn't lead to good.
It doesn't lead to good marriage,
outcomes.
and you can have great sex with somebody who you don't even like, who is not a good fit for you with marriage. Okay, so sexual compatibility or having a great sexual experience is not a good indicator of having a good marriage.
So for some reason, I feel that I'm going to share this story, even though it's sort of Heather's. Okay.
What? I don't even know what he's going to share. Okay.
When we were at the point where we were, I guess, courting, right?
Yes, we were
to
the
officially,
point where we were about to be engaged.
Officially talking and trying to figure out, do we want to be serious about this, right? Or do we want to go forward towards marriage with our relationship? Someone in Heather's life, who shall remain nameless, even though they deserve to be named, someone who shall remain nameless.
Just say they're a boomer. So there was
A
the
boomer.
whole sexual
A boomer,
revelation, a revelation thing.
Said to Heather, wait, you guys aren't sleeping together? But you're like talking about marriage? But what if you're not sexually compatible? Now, did you actually respond with this? Or
Yeah.
Okay, say what you said.
I said, well, we'll figure it out.
Right. It's like, this is rocket science, like, you get married, you're compatible in all these ways, but we just couldn't figure out how to have sex.
How to have good sex.
We couldn't figure it out. It's like, come on.
So let me just say, look, let's just be really frank and just say we waited until we were married to have sex.
Right. And in particular, we did not kiss until the ring was on Heather's finger.
Now that was a decision that we made only because I knew myself enough and he knew himself enough to know that kissing, on the mouth was a slippery slope to other things. And at that point, we were feeling very attracted to each other.
Right.
And we just really wanted to have integrity in this area of our life. And so Stephen was so cute during the wooing process because we made sure that anytime we spent together, because we didn't have people in our life that would be chaperoning us. Okay.
Right.
So we had to sort of integrate chaperoning into the way we spent time together. And so we was always in very public places. We had a rule that we would never be in each other's apartment alone for any, given amount of time. And so he would bring me to my apartment, drop me off, say bye, and very quickly turn on his heel and practically run back to his van. And I'm like standing there going, oh my God, but he did what he had to do to maintain his side of the boundary. Right. But we actually made a decision together that we would not kiss until when and if there would be a ring on my finger. And so the night Stephen asked me to marry him, and after I said yes, we then kissed on the mouth.
And put the ring on
my finger.
Right. And then we kissed. Yeah.
So, okay. Practical advice.
Okay. You already mentioned that. Don't be alone for periods of time.
Don't be alone for prolonged periods of time during this wooing.
We really went through this, but do ask elders and trusted friends about what they think of your prospective mate.
Right. If appropriate, ask your parents.
Yeah.
They might think you're weird, but just do it anyway.
Also, look, guys, we are totally in reality. We know that some of the people listening to this stream are thinking, my parents are the worst people to give me advice. We get it. Yeah. And if they are the worst people, then don't look to them.
Yeah. Find someone else.
Sometimes we're blessed with parents who can really be helpful and wise. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we're not. And that's okay, because there's other people in your life who love you. Right? Yeah. We love you.
Right.
Talk to us if you can't find anyone else. There's other people in your life who love you. Think about that. Look in your heart and think, who are the people who really want the best for me?
Yeah.
The people who are really on my side. They're on my team, right? And talk to them. We think that premarital counseling can be good. Now, we did not do this with a therapist. We just did this with a pastor and his wife. But there are people who know how to do good premarital counseling, and it can really help a lot, in part by just making sure that you've walked through some of those practical questions. Have you guys talked about whether you'll have children?
Yeah.
Are you spiritually compatible? Right?
So there is a chapter in this book that goes through like 28 questions that you can ask someone who's a prospective spouse, and very practical things. Some of them are practical, like, how do you like to keep house? How organized are you? Do you prefer clutter or minimalism? What standard of living do you imagine having? What role will extended families play? Our friends from India, it is expected that the wife's mother come and live with them for 3 months after a child is born. Are you going to be comfortable with that?
Which is awesome, by the way, if you've ever had a baby.
These questions are very practical. They may seem unromantic, but I can tell you something that is not at all romantic. Really hating the person you're married to. Okay. So just be unromantic for a little while. Okay. So again, you had some other stray thoughts, or?
No, I think we'll move on to.
You're allowed to take it seriously. Dating can be casual. We're in an era of casual dating sex. It's a myth that your 20s are for being casual.
Yes. Treat the 20s as serious, not casual.
Yeah. Risk-taking and taking relationships seriously can go hand in hand. And what I mean by risk-taking is, hey, take that mission trip if you're a Christian and you want to do it while you're not, married with children. If you want to go on that girls' trip to Italy, do it. I mean, that's a great time for doing that. You are making choices that are going to impact all the other decades, memorable life choices. Travel can be a really fun way to get to know yourself better. How do you behave in all kinds of different situations? Marriage in itself is a risk, and you're going to be taking that leap together. So having a little bit of testing of yourself, but don't test yourself by sleeping with a million people. That's not a good way to test yourself to see if you're ready for marriage. There are other ways to test your character that are better. So
okay, so let's talk about the right one, because it was finding and winning the right one. So this is so important. And I remember talking to a wise counselor, and I said something that implied above and below, like, she's too good for him or something. I don't know, something like that. And he didn't like that. And so he introduced me to a term that I have found so helpful. He said, it's better to just talk about they're not a good fit or they are a good fit. Right. And that's right. It's not about, I'm unhappy because I'm not married to the richest woman in the world. Well, she just wouldn't be a good fit for me. So talking about whether she's above and I'm below, I mean, that's just silly.
Or she's not supermodel material.
Yeah. I mean, it just doesn't even make any sense.
Not most of the population isn't.
Right. Better is to think about fit. So let me share a little bit of how I thought about this in my life, and then I'll have Heather share. So in previous relationships, I noticed some things. I noticed that one girlfriend was very sweet. Everyone liked her. I liked her. Sweet and kind person, but she didn't have the feistiness that you see in my wife. And she lacked emotional depth, which I realized was really important to me. I realized I needed someone who was a good fit emotionally, right? So, when you think about fit, there's all the practical stuff we talked about, like what is our vision for our life? And there's also things like emotional fit, spiritual fit, to some degree, intellectual fit.
Yeah.
So talk about that.
Talk about that. Yeah. So I think for me, I should say that I did not grow up in a home that was very focused on intellectual kinds of things. And I didn't even realize that I was interested in intellectual kinds of things until I got to college and I started to have the experience of, I might be smart. Like I didn't even know I was smart. Okay. I mean, there was not a lot of encouragement in my home. So, so I had an experience where, the boyfriend I had at the time just really did not respect me intellectually. Was very dismissive of me in this regard, kind of sexist in a way, like because I'm the woman that I wouldn't, be needing to think about those kinds of things. But I think my biggest fear in marriage was that I would be bored, that I wouldn't be able to have the kind of discourse that Stephen and I often have. I mean, our dinner table discussions with our children, with each other, are very deep and lively and loud and interesting. And we talk about all kinds of philosophical things. And I love that. And I think if someone didn't recognize and respect that in me, then this is not someone that I could be spending my life with.
Right. So I hope these examples help to think through some of these things, and just don't be so dismissive of your own gut instinct, right?
Yeah.
When you're like, I like so much about this person, but man, we just can't really have a pleasant conversation, or, whatever it is that's bugging you. I mean, listen to that.
Right.
You're learning about yourself. And that will help you realize when someone is a good fit, when you think through those things and you just notice who you get along with and who you work well with and all that sort of thing, right?
Right. Well, and I want to say to the guys who said, man, you're really intense, that was important feedback.
Yeah.
Okay. What they were saying is, this isn't a good fit for me.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And as soon as they said that, I knew that it was a waste of both of our time.
Right.
Because I need somebody who can handle my feistiness and intensity and passion, being passionate about things, who is, more steady in that regard, but can also engage me on those kinds of things and not be dismissive and not think I'm ridiculous for being passionate about things. So, your who you are and the things that you're interested in and the things that you're bringing to the table have value, and you shouldn't dismiss those things. Okay. So.
Right. Okay. We actually covered a lot of this stuff already. So let's just get to for marriage. And then I did want to mention, just share an experience about getting engaged. So someone asked a question that I don't think I want to get into, but we don't have to
get into that a little bit.
Oh, okay. If you want to. Well, okay. How about you'll talk about that and then I'll talk about that feeling when we were at the theater.
Oh, so the question is.
Okay, wait, no, not yet. Okay. So let's finish up for marriage.
Okay.
Finding and winning the right one.
Yeah.
For marriage. And that is, I hope, one of the biggest takeaways from this is that dating, it's a little unclear what in the heck you're doing a lot of the time. Are we moving towards marriage? Are we just hanging out?
Well, and being sexually attracted to a person isn't a good indicator of whether you will be good marriage partners.
Right.
Sex is just one aspect of your marital relationship.
Yeah. So is dating basically just looking around for people who you have sexual chemistry with? Anyway, so the whole point of the shift from dating to courtship is that you're very, you see the marriage as the telos, as the goal of the process, right? And you're unashamed of that, and you're upfront about that, right? So my dad would always say, long friendship, short engagement, long marriage. Well, let's just share our own experience and take from it what you will, which is that, as I said, we independently decided to stop dating, and neither of us went back to the dating practices until we courted and got married. So that was some years. For me, it was
Like
five years. For Heather, it was like 4 years.
4 years, yeah.
So we spent years in our 20s not dating, right?
I was 23 when I
She
met
was 23
Steven.
when she stopped dating. Yeah.
So
And I was a little bit older than that. But the point is, we were in sort of like prime time of our life to be dating, and we stopped, right?
yeah.
Kind of scary, right? But what this meant is that during those years, Heather and I, and this was not, I didn't have like an agenda or anything, but Heather and I would see each other. We went to this series of speaking events that a seminary sponsored, and we would hang out afterwards with a group of friends.
Yeah.
I would even have lunch with her, which I just did not think of it as a date, which actually turned out to be great because I realized looking back that she was just, a friend from church basically. And I would occasionally
every
say,
few months he would say, hey, do you want to go hang out? And I'd say, sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And I didn't even think of it as a date. And that was great because I realized that I ended up following Heather's advice about dating, which is I was just completely genuine. I wasn't trying to put on a show. I was just being myself and talking with a friend. And so she was just getting to know me as a person and not as someone who's trying to
Now, there was
make a
shift.
move or something.
There was a shift.
Eventually. Yeah.
Eventually. He
Right.
went out, we would, it was just he and I out together, but we were both adults. And one night we went out, he took me to, it was really good. Salim's. It was Middle Eastern food. It was so good. Anyway, and we're hanging out and just, being friends or whatever. And then he's like, hey, there's this neighborhood nearby. Let's go for a walk. I house sat for a summer there, and it's just this really pretty neighborhood. And so we're walking along, and I'm just getting this feeling like, this is feeling like really nice being with him, And Stephen also was getting some feelings.
Right.
And this was several years after we
Yeah.
first met, you know what I mean?
Right.
And it was pretty soon after that, I would say, things started to turn toward a courtship.
Right.
So we're walking along, and it just, I don't know, it just felt really good and peaceful. And you're smiling, so do you want to say something?
Well, I think it would have been that maybe.
Yeah.
When I went to my parents after that time with Heather, and I said, Mom, Dad, I want you to pray because I feel like there could be there could be a possibility for me and Heather to be together.
Yeah. And I think it was the following spring that you said, hey, I'm interested in seeing you more.
Yeah, it was basically I initiated a courtship.
Yeah. And then I immediately was like, well, anyway, there's more to the process. But yeah, we started courting within half a year after that.
Okay, so just because part of the fun here is to share a story, and I hope you enjoy it too, I will just talk about getting engaged. Someone,
somewhere right here.
Red Hawk asked the age gap between us. It's 5 years.
5 years, yeah.
Yeah, I'm 5 years older. Okay, so Misty Moore is very bold. We're all real comfortable with each other here, I guess. And asks, so how was the first kiss? You comment on that, and then I want to share what happened after.
It was amazing. It was amazing. It was amazing. I mean,
there was a lot of buildup.
There was,
right.
Well, and
we had been disciplined. We had waited, right? We waited to do it right. And then it was like.
It was amazing. I mean, there was just this permission, and there was.
The ring was on your finger.
Ring was on my finger.
Safety.
And the
safety.
kiss felt like solidifying this covenant that we were making with each other. And I don't know. I mean, when people talk about fireworks when someone kisses, I mean, it was for me physically and emotionally, it was just like this explosion of, oh my gosh, So
here's something I remember from that evening. So my plan was to have her at a nice dinner, propose to her, and then take her to the theater where it was it was Christmas. It was December. It was Christmas time.
Yeah.
And we went to the Fox and saw some music there. And I remember something, and I don't know if it's an emotional or spiritual memory or whatever, but we were sitting next to each other. She had the ring on her finger now, and I think we were both looking at it sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And I think holding hands. And well, I'm going to share my rationalization of how I think about this after I share the experience. The experience, I realized, thinking back on it, is that I felt this, I don't know what I even mean here, but it felt like something came out of me and went around her, so that it's like we were now together in like an emotional and spiritual sense. Now, we had just been engaged and we got married. We had a short engagement. Like
Oh yeah, I recommend the short engagement if you want to maintain your sexual fidelity.
Right. So we were engaged for 4 months, and then we got
just
married.
enough
So
time to plan a very
threw together a wedding.
and these extravagant weddings. What are you doing?
Yeah. So
that money's
anyway,
better spent on a down payment on a house. Anyway.
So here's how I think about that. Number one, I think I was experiencing something that was real. I was experiencing like the spiritual reality of us being married, but we were only engaged officially, right?
Yeah.
Well, how do I think about this? Well, I'm an anarchist and I'm a Bible believing Christian. And so here's how I think about it for what it's worth. When God establishes marriage in the Bible, he says, for this reason, a man and a woman, leave their parents and they become one flesh together, right? So marriage is established before the state. The state is later. It's established before the church. So this may seem a little unconservative or unorthodox, but I actually pay no attention to being officially married. I consider it almost negligible. Okay. There are people who, for whatever reason, don't get officially married, but they are together, they're having children together, and they are married in every which way you think you can, especially in terms, I'm thinking of a couple that I know where their commitment to each other is complete, right? They are married.
They are married.
They're not just married in the eyes of God, they are married, right? And you don't need the blessing of the state or even of the church to be married. It's a decision two people make, and you can tell it's real because they leave and cleave. They leave their families and they become a new family. And that's how you know you have something real, right? And so I think that in the eyes of God, effectively, we were married that night. That's how I see it. Spiritually, we were married. We wanted to be, respectful and proper. And so we chose to wait until we were officially married in the church. Publicly. And signed the official government document before we had sex. But I think really we were married at that point. And in fact, if you look in the Bible, like Mary and Joseph, they talk about a betrothal, being betrothed, and how it was very serious to break a betrothal. It was effectively like a divorce, right? You didn't do it lightly. So if you read about how Joseph is wrestling with what to do now that Mary's pregnant, and he's like, this is an awkward situation, and you see what he's wrestling with, and then the Lord speaks to him and says, "It's okay. It's okay. It's okay." Right. Anyway, I just thought it'd be interesting for you to hear my unique perspective on that particular issue of what marriage really. I guess what I'm trying to say is marriage is a spiritual reality, and thinking of it as something that happens at the courthouse or in the church is not quite right. Yeah. These honor and make official and make public and so forth. But marriage itself is a spiritual reality, and you feel it when you're in it.
And think about how disintegrating it is to go around sleeping with tons of people. How disintegrating that is spiritually and emotionally for you. When you are participating in the act of becoming one flesh with various people who are not your spouse over and over and over again, that's damaging. That's damaging, ultimately.
Okay, we're going to do some Q&A because courtesy of the Mrs-Radlib-Channel, we already have some questions to respond to. And so I think we've covered this. So I'm going to skip some things because some things where I don't want to be too redundant. Yeah. What qualities do we pray for in a spouse for our kids?
Oh gosh.
Well, I think we've gone over them basically.
Yeah, I mean, I'm as our older children are getting older, I've already been having discussions with our 16-year-old about what would be a good fit for her. So we're already thinking about, this kind of guy probably isn't a good fit for you. You've got a strong personality. And so you're going to need somebody who's going to be able to stand up against that, or not against, but not be bowled over by you.
A good fit.
And you won't respect somebody who you can control.
Right.
So we're already starting to have conversations. And so, and as we have those conversations, then I can begin to pray in that regard. So I would say, as your kids start to come of age, start having conversations with them. Let's talk about what you might like in a spouse. What are you bringing to the table? What are your interests and things? And so you can begin preparing them for marriage if that is what they want. Because not everybody has to be married. You know, we have at least 1 or 2 kids who are saying explicitly they don't want to be married. And that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
You know, so you can begin having those conversations, get feedback from them, and begin praying. And and you can pray with them for a future spouse. So
Well, and you know your children,
Yeah.
as Heather's indicating, right? We know our children, we love our children, we want the best long-term things for them.
Mhm.
And so we can pray knowledgeably, and we can have these kinds of discussions where we help them think about, who are you?
right,
And what do you want
Right.
for your life?
Right.
So distinction between dates, courtship, dating, and engagement,
Mhm.
all that sort of thing. Right. So, well, it's fuzzy. The big problem with dating, in my mind, is that it is unclear what in the heck it is. I think
Yeah.
for some people, they would go through the process that we're calling courtship,
Mhm.
and they would say that we dated.
Yeah.
And if you want to call it that, that's fine.
Mhm.
We're using those terms. Don't get hung up on the terminology. We're using the terms to distinguish between courtship, which is marriage oriented,
Mhm.
and dating, where it's very fuzzy what in the heck's going on. And maybe
Mhm.
you have people who are like dating and say, well, I don't want to be married and I don't want to have kids. I just want to date.
Mhm.
Okay.
Those two things really aren't really compatible. But
Yeah.
I would say dating is great for you to do with your spouse. Going out on dates,
Right.
where you get that time together.
Yeah. By the way, and that was another shift in my thinking. And I tried to signal that from the beginning of our marriage. I began to see that it was a false thing that, you have your fun before you're married, and then you get married, and then your fun's over. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of that in our culture, which
It's
is
the whole
that,
settling down versus settling
down and stuff. Yeah. So I wanted to really signal that the beginning of our marriage was the beginning of our adventures. And I had money at the time, so no more. But back then I had some money. So when we got married, we actually left for 10 weeks and had a honeymoon primarily in Taormina, Sicilia. Taormina, Sicily. And we lived in an apartment there where we were able to cook she cooked our meals primarily. And then once a week, we would go off and do a day trip and visit a part of the island.
Yeah.
And then at the end of our time at that apartment, we took a couple weeks and went up Italy and just were in sort of normal tourist mode.
Mhm.
But for me, the most exciting part was just to live in this other place where we went to an English-speaking church and we went to Nino's and he welcomed us
every Sunday
every
after
Sunday
church.
after
We had
church.
a restaurant we'd go to, and
Yeah.
and it really had this feeling of we are, because not everybody can do a 10-week
Yeah.
Italian Sicilian honeymoon. Okay, that's pretty ridiculous, right? But it really set the tone of this is exciting. This isn't boring.
Right.
We really, this is thrilling, in fact. And Stephen was very comfortable with traveling. I had never really done any traveling, and so it was like he was bringing me into this exciting life of traveling that he had already done, and I was like, all right, let's go. So that was really fun, and it was just the sense of like us in the world, and it was a great way to sort of solidify the commitment and just have that private time together. It was nice. So is parental permission required?
Yeah, for dating, courtship, for engagement.
No.
Yeah. Okay. So what I would say is, we have parents we can't trust. Traditionally, you would honor your parents by doing this, right?
Mhm.
If you have a relationship with your parents or you have parents who are solid, then I think it's wise to do that. But let's just remember the point, and then you can figure out the details in your situation.
Mhm.
The point is that you're above board and you're not being sneaky.
Right.
Right. Because the man who doesn't have honest intentions is not going to be upfront with the parents. Right. He's going to work around them and sneak around because he just wants to use her and then drop her at some point.
Right.
That is why there's such a strong tradition of honoring the parents, or it might be the grandparents in some people's cases. It might be the pastor. I mean, whatever, But you find someone who represents a figure of authority. Spiritually speaking, real quick, I would just say that biblically speaking, it has to do with submitting yourself to hierarchy and authority, ultimately where God is at the top of that, right? And so you show that you are in submission. You're not you're not someone rebelling against God, right? You show you're in submission to the divine order by finding, might be the parents. I did go ahead and ask her parents before asking her to be married. We'd been doing the courtship, but then I went ahead and asked her parents
Just
permission.
on ceremony.
Yeah, just to make it official. And we were pretty older when we got married.
I was 27 and
Yeah,
you
I
were
was 32
32.
when we got married. So we were older. I could have skipped that step, but it was just about me signaling that my heart is in the right place. I'm giving due honor, right? So that's what that's really about. So it's not required, but try to figure out a way to show deference to the people who love, if you're a man, the people who love the woman that you're courting. Figure out ways that you can show that, hey, this is what I'm about. I'm being honest. I'm being upfront. And I see that you are people who she considers that, who are her parents, or she considers effectively as her like spiritual or emotional parents. And so I want to meet you. I want to tell you what I'm up to here. And I want to be honest and forthright about it. I'm not sneaking around trying to pull some crap, right? Right. Did we make mistakes during our courtship? I don't know. There was one point where I stopped the courtship, and I can't even remember what I was going through at the time, but it didn't last long. And I remember that it took a little while to sink in, but I remember that the way Heather reacted to that was actually what made me finally feel sure that she was a good fit and someone I really respected, because she didn't act in any way manipulative or try to pull me back into it by playing some kind of emotional mind game on me or something. She was just like, she was having feelings that I did this, but she just was like, okay, if that's what you're going to do.
Yeah. And then I went home and yelled at God.
Yeah. And she was angry, right? but I think for me, just because of my own background, it was an important experience of seeing that she was not going to run a game on me. And that made me feel safe to be in a relationship with her. So maybe that's a courtship story that's worth sharing there. Okay, I wanted to just share, there's a book by Willard Harley called His Needs, Her Needs. I just wanted to share that list. I think it's really valuable in response to the question of how much attention needs to be paid to appearance. Obviously, our culture is just over the top on appearance and Botox and, hey, the celebrity just had a baby a week ago, and look, you can't even tell. And, it's like, geez, the pressure is, we need to bring the pressure down on this. Having said that, let's put appearance in its proper place, right? I got to quote Greatest American Hero, an old TV show, probably no one remembers but me, where
we're dating ourselves.
Yeah, the teenagers, he's a high school teacher, I think, and the teenagers ask his spouse, I think, what is the place of, being physically attracted? And she said, it's the beginning and the end. She said, it's the first thing I noticed is that I felt an attraction to him. And then, there's all the other stuff to figure out if you're a good fit and all that. And then finally, when you're together, you enjoy the attraction to each other, right?
Yeah. So
it's a little thing at the beginning, and then there's a long time of just enjoying being married to someone who you like to look at. Yeah. Yeah. I love how Willard Harley puts attraction in his list of the men's needs. Now, by the way, this is not fixed in stone. These are needs that men and women have, but just in general, the top need for men is sexual fulfillment. No shocker. Second is recreational companionship. Someone who will do fun things with you, right? So
we like to go out to eat.
Yeah, we like to go out to eat. Heather went to Sicily with me. It was
really fun.
She had never gone out of the country. It was risky for her.
Yeah.
But she did that with me, and one of my memories that's coming back to me is Costamola, which is above Taormina.
Oh yeah.
We went up to it on transport, I believe.
Oh, that was terrifying.
And then we decided to walk down from this mountain. Basically.
Yeah, they had like Stations of the Cross down this mountain, and we were walking down this mountain.
And so we just decided, well, we'll just walk back. And I just have this strong positive memory that she was up for it.
Look, I'm not the kind of woman who's going to jump out of a plane or jump out off a mountain and do skydiving. That's not me.
Some men need that.
Some men need that. But what Stephen needed was companionship, someone
Yeah.
to just go out
Do
with
stuff with.
and
Yeah.
be talkative and
Yeah. Experience things
laugh
together.
and experience things together. And
Yeah.
I'm your gal. I can
Yep.
do that. And I still remember our first full night in Sicily, and we were exhausted. Oh my gosh, the trip there, the plane, and we grabbed some food. We made the mistake of napping when we got, because you're supposed to like acclimate yourself right away to the time. Anyway, we went out, we slept, and then we went out and grabbed some dinner. And I did not speak Italian or Sicilian. And then, but Stephen had been to this town before. And so he's like, there's this gelato place down the street. So we went to get the gelato. We got the gelato, and we're standing on Piazza April 9. We're looking out into the Mediterranean. Mount Etna is on my right, and it's twinkling with lights on the mountain. And I take a bite, of this gelato, and it's like I was hearing Italian opera singing in my head. I don't know. It just, stuff like that was just really fun, and that we can
Wonderful
laugh about that now. And even then it was just fun,
So number 3 for a man is an attractive spouse. Okay. So I love how he discusses this. Really recommend the book, by the way, His Needs, Her Needs. If you are single, it's a great book to read. If you're married, it's a great book to read. And he said, okay, this can be overdone where women feel this pressure to be like supermodel pretty. And he says, that's not really what the need is for a man. The need for a man is that when you're in public with your wife, you want to feel proud. You're with a woman who presents herself well, and you feel proud to be with her, right? So I actually, because of reading that book, I actually noticed that feeling in myself. Heather and I will go out on a date, and I will say, you were really meeting the attractive spouse need, using his language. But the point is, I just felt good to be with her, and obviously part of it is her physical appearance, but also part of it is when we're out together, we'll end up striking up a conversation with somebody, and Heather is just a delightful companion, and we will have interesting conversations and make friends and stuff like that, right? So I leave the evening feeling like I am with someone who I'm really proud to be with. I'm proud for people to meet us as a couple. I am proud to introduce my wife to someone who I've gotten to get to know somehow. I'll be like, oh, I'm so excited to introduce you to my wife, because I'm proud of her. I'm proud she's my wife. I'm proud she's my companion, and I'm proud of how she looks, right?
I thought of something funny. In terms of the being bored thing, one of the things that's fun with Stephen is banter. So like, he'll do this thing where like he'll go into like a technical thing, a way of speaking, he'll, like you just said, he will actually say to me, you're really meeting the attractive spouse need tonight. And I'll be like, I love it when you talk dirty to me, like we'll do this banter, but I just think it's funny when he's like technical about things, about this kind of stuff.
So number 4 for men is domestic support. And so that is, being a good housemaker and so on. This is something that is feminists have really gone after. The woman is enslaved in the home and all this.
Yeah.
But
that's what I wanted, was to be a stay-at-home mom. And because I'm home a lot of the time, that means that, keeping the laundry, the dishes, all that stuff, kind of, keeping that going doesn't mean it's all my responsibility. When Stephen's home, he'll start a load of laundry. When, if I've had a baby, you better believe he's in there doing the dishes or whatever. You know what I mean? Now that we have older kids, we've assigned them dishes and domestic. This is about teaching our children how to be adults. And presumably when you get married, you're already an adult. And so, there's not a divvying up of whose responsibility is whose. It's a lot of convenience of just who's home, Okay,
number 5 is admiration. I would use the biblical word in the New Testament says, husbands, love your wives. Wives, respect your husbands. So the admonition to the husband is to love his wife. In fact, it even says you should love your wife as Christ loved the church. That means sacrificially, right? You'd lay down your life for your wife. And it says that wives should respect their husbands. So that need for the number 5 need there for man is to be admired by his wife, to feel respect from her, right? And so this is why it's such a problem when a woman is, they talk about a husband being henpecked or whatever, when a woman is just at her husband and she's dissatisfied, right? And you need to address that. Okay, so on the women's needs, you may not know what all these mean because of his terminology, but how about you talk about them? So top need for women.
You know this more than I do.
Okay.
This book.
Top need for women is affection.
Affection.
So talk about that a little.
I don't know.
So basically what he says is a woman feels a need for regular acknowledgement from her husband that,
Mhm.
that he likes her.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
I would say to Heather sometimes, especially if she's feeling down or having a bad interaction with somebody or whatever, I'll say, you know, I love you, Heather, but I like you. You know, I enjoy you. I enjoy being with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Stephen's a very affectionate person, and being physically demonstrative was not a big thing in my home. It's not something I witnessed a lot of. And so, you know, it feels good to be able to have that attention, you know, you're attentive to that.
so number 2 is conversation.
That's a big one for
We've
me.
talked about that a lot, but
That's a big one for
women need to talk,
Mhm.
right? And number 3, honesty and openness.
Huge for me. Huge. Absolutely huge. How can you trust somebody if they're not honest, you know? So that's a big one.
Yeah, and I think for men, I would just say on that, you just you keep your wife informed. You keep your wife informed of, you know, big financial things that are having an impact. You don't just try to manage it on your own. You let her know, hey, whoa, we got a really big bill, and I don't know how we're going to handle it this month, or what.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
you keep her informed about that, but you also keep her informed about more personal things.
Mhm.
You know, how you're feeling.
Yeah.
You know, honey, I'm sorry, but I am in a bad mood right now, and let me tell you why. Because this is what happened.
Yeah,
You know, you let her know what's going on with you,
hmm
and then she can understand what the situation is,
right.
and then work with you instead of feeling like you've got to manage everything like a man. You know, yes, you
Mhm.
take responsibility as a man and everything, but the whole point of marriage is that you have a companion now,
hmm
a helpmeet, as they used to put it,
Mhm.
right? You have someone alongside you, and you don't have to just handle everything on your own.
hmm
So if you are honest and open with your wife, she will be able to support you,
hmm
be alongside you, think with you,
hmm
come up with ideas that maybe
Mhm.
you wouldn't have thought of, right?
hmm
You're a resource to each other.
hmm
If you're open with her, she can be a resource to you. If you're not going to get that benefit. She's going to feel shut out.
That's a horrible feeling.
Yeah.
Being shut out. Financial
So,
commitment. I think we already touched
yeah,
upon that. That
right.
this was something that was important to me.
Right.
You know?
And he says, you know, some people are like, well, does that mean that, you know, what if, you know, the guy's going to be a doctor and they meet and they get married while he's still going through school and
Mhm.
she's working while he's finishing
Mhm.
up his degree? He says, no, that's fine. It comes back to this pregnancy need, right?
Right. It's
The
not
point,
about the woman not working. It's about
well, he says the point is she needs to know that she can stop working and he will be able to support the family,
Mhm.
because getting pregnant, having babies, means that at least for a little while, you need to be able to not work. And in some cases, as a couple, you decide the woman will just stay home, right? But that option, and sometimes you'd like the woman to keep working, and for one reason or another, she can't.
Mhm.
You have a baby who has extra needs and so on and
right,
so forth.
right. Or the pregnancy is really difficult or whatever.
Right. So you
So-
need a man who's ready to. The woman's going to feel safer with a man who can take care, who can support the family,
Mhm.
even if she's got a great job. The man needs to be able to support the family.
Mhm.
And then finally, family commitment has to
Mhm.
do with a man who takes care, pays attention to your children. Right? That is a need for women, is to have a man who's a good father.
Yeah.
Who loves his children and spends time with them and talks with them.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
So anyway, I thought that was all very useful, and it puts that. That was my long way of answering the question: how much attention needs to be paid to appearance? It's in there. That's real. I'm not trying to pretend it isn't, but it's one thing among many things.
I'm sorry. This
Yeah,
is
you want to
funny.
read Mickey's?
Yeah, Mickey says number 0 for men is to be able to do revisionist history streams together with the spouse. That's really funny. Okay.
Okay,
So,
then let's see other
yeah.
questions. Then we'll move towards wrapping it up.
Yep.
I think. Is it wise to date someone you've only interacted with online? What if they live far away? Their parents live far away. I think we have to be careful. This is not our experience.
Yeah.
Can't really speak to it. I hope that we've given a lot of principles and ways of thinking about this that you can apply to this.
I think we've established that dating as it is now is not a wise way to go about anything. Okay. So is it wise to date someone you've only interacted with online? I don't think dating is wise. Is it wise to court with someone you've only interacted with online? It can be. Get other people in your life involved. You know, See what they think of this person. I think when people live far away, it complicates things. But it's not like that can never happen. You know, if you're from a culture where you want to marry someone who's from your culture, and maybe you're here to go to school and your family back home is helping you, you know, find a spouse back home, you know, I think that can be a part of the courtship process if you've got people involved in your life in that regard. But living far away is going to make it more difficult to see them in various kinds of situations, so that you can kind of assess who they are and see their character. So that might make it difficult. Although the woman that Stephen was sort of in the early stages of courtship with, she lived all the way in England. And so the people who were kind of trying to set them up were here. And so he actually went to England. And
she actually came here first.
She came here first.
So I met her here.
So they had an initial meeting, and then he went to England and
met her parents.
And so they were like, I have to tell you, we were not courting yet.
Yeah. This is a story that probably needs to be told.
Okay. So I was like so focused. I was in graduate school. I was focused on getting my graduate degree.
You'd stopped dating.
I had stopped dating years before. And then a friend of ours mentioned in passing that Stephen was in England meeting some woman that he'd been corresponding to. And I nearly fell over. I was like, what? And I didn't say anything. And I got off the phone with our friend, and I just stood there, and I was like having like a mild anxiety attack. I was like, you know, breathing. I was like, what's going on? And I was like, he's not supposed to marry her. I actually said that out loud to myself. And then I said, he's supposed to marry me. And then I thought, what am I saying?
You had a great moment of realization.
I said, what am I saying? And I was like, and I remember starting to pray, and I was like, do I have feelings for Stephen? I mean, literally within a few months, he initiated a courtship. Right. You know what I mean? Like I felt like the Lord really protected me during that time. Mm-hmm. I mean, here we are around each other every weekend, you know, in mutual friends. And I just, God's timing was really good.
We're going to skip a couple of things. Already mentioned this issue of premarital cohabitation associated with greater odds of divorce. We had an article on that. I've just put that link in the live chart, live chat, if you want to see some data on that. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So just some questions I wanted to put out there in terms of fit and thinking about the other person. Can you go through hard things with this person? Well, question before that is, can you go through hard things, right? Right. You need to be a strong person and someone
how do you deal with conflict?
Yeah, someone who deals with difficult things and finds that you have the inner fortitude or you turn to the Lord and you get strength to deal with difficult things, right? So you need to be someone who can go through hard things. And then you need to ask yourself, this person that I'm considering, can they go through hard things? Can we go through hard things together? Because that's what shatters some marriages. For example, miscarriages are very common. As we've mentioned on the birth stream, we've had as many lost children as we've had born live. We've had a lot of children. Double what you would think, because we lost a lot.
A couple of those miscarriages were late first trimester. One was very complicated. It went on and on for months, and I ended up having to have 2 surgeries, and it was devastating. And I experienced a pretty deep depression after that. So, you know, I needed Stephen to
life can be challenging.
It can be challenging, you know.
And so that's miscarriages, but then also there's loss of a child who is born, and
we have not experienced that.
Yeah, we haven't experienced that. Who is born, and you get to hold and you get to have with you, and maybe they even grow up for a while, and then they die when they're 1 year old or 2 years old or 5 years old or 15 in a car accident or something like that. Can you go through that together? That's a question to think about. Can you go through sickness together? Here's a really challenging one. Can you go through infidelity together? Infidelity, as we know in our culture, is quite common. A lot of people stay together after it becomes revealed that there was infidelity. They find that they are able to get through it together, and they are able to heal together. So, you know, this is serious stuff, getting married.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think, did you want to go? We've hit a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
So do you want to say anything about what you learned about the 20s?
Yeah, well,
reading this book.
Yeah, I'm not finished reading this book that was recommended to me, but again, like I said, I was amazed. I was like, oh, we're already hitting a lot of these points because we had already done our notes for this talk. But I think because the cultural myth around being in your 20s is that your 20s are this time to kind of play around and they're not very serious and all that. It just doesn't prepare you for the rest of your life. And, the 20s are just one decade pretty early in your life. Presumably, you're going to live for another 4 decades after that, with somebody. So if you want to be married, begin preparing yourself for marriage in your 20s. No research supports that waiting until later in your 30s results in a more stable marriage. There is no research to support that. Now, I am not saying get married at 19 years old, but I am saying that, at least one of the benefits of homeschooling is that I get to be around my children and get to know them and their character. I get to be part of their character formation. And I get to start to see from a very young age what their gifts and talents are and kind of guide them in that direction, such that by the time they're in their 20s, I fully expect they're going to know themselves in a much better way than those who have been thrust into a public school setting or even a private school setting where they're age segregated and there's just sort of this prolonged immaturity, So I think that it's okay to take this seriously. You can still have fun, even if you're looking at marriage as a serious thing, even as young in your 20s. And modern dating is this thing about just like playing house. Without commitment, it's not healthy. It is not emotionally healthy. It does not result in stable family formation. Okay. And it does not instill the virtues that lead to lasting marital commitment. So I would also just say we have had a couple people we've had many people actually throughout the years that we've been married reach out to us for counseling. I'm actually trained as a marriage and family therapist and was licensed in our state. And, and together we've been able to kind of give people feedback and we're open to doing that. We've done that even recently. So I just want to say you have support from us. You have people who've actually this month makes 20 years.
Yes. We're about to have our 20th anniversary.
Right.
Wedding anniversary.
Right. And, in those 20 years, we've dealt with some very difficult things. And so, we may be able to help you, to support you, to encourage you. And we're glad to do that, to take the time to do that. So is there anything to wrap up that you'd like to say?
Yeah, I just want to talk about, we have the myth that waiting results in a more stable marriage, meaning that if you're 29 and you get married, you're more likely to have a stable marriage than if you're 23 and you get married, right? Now, there is some element of truth to this. Teenage marriages are less stable.
Yeah.
People get married before they finish the maturing process, right? They're just. I consider teenagers to be young men, young women, but they're still young men, young women. They're not really ready to make that move, right?
Most of them are not ready to support a household.
Right. Yeah. Teenage man is
even with a combined income.
Yeah. A young teenage man is probably not ready to have that financial commitment that I was talking about. Right. They need to be at a little better place in their career and so forth. Right. So that doesn't make so much sense. Having said that, Heather found that there's no research that supports the idea that waiting longer than the teen years results in more stable marriages. Yeah. Because we homeschool, we know homeschooling community, and people get married a little younger that are homeschooled.
Early to mid 20s, I'm seeing that a lot.
Yeah, they're more mature, as I think is well known that homeschooled children tend to be more mature at a younger age. They're more mature and they're ready. They're 21 and they're ready. And I knew this in theory, and I kind of knew some people from a distance, but now we've got one daughter at least who's 16. She's just turned 16 recently, and she is so mature. It's just mind blowing to see where someone can be at this age. When I grew up with, everybody who was 15, 16, they were just utter children and just totally immature, She is well on her way to being ready to be married, as a younger,
in her 20s,
in her early 20s. So she's on the path by now, right? So I thought that was a really interesting point that Heather threw in, that we're not trying to push anybody to do anything stupid, but don't think there's some kind of virtue in waiting until you're 35 to get married. And has to be said, practically speaking, there is a downside for women, which is that you stop being able to have children. And that is something that Phyllis Schlafly, for example, really emphasized.
Mm-hmm.
She said, the problem is feminism has pushed women to put career first during the years that they're fertile.
Right.
And then they get to a certain age and they're like, oh, I want to have babies. And now their body literally can't do it anymore. So we've got a big problem there in our culture.
Yeah.
Her advice was, you can have it all, just not at the same time.
Not all at once.
So what she did is she had her children, and then she went back to school and became a lawyer, and of course a prominent political figure and everything.
Now, I did go to college. I had no idea if I was going to be married. And actually, coming from the neighborhood that I was from actually had a pretty big impact on me in terms of my desire to be able to support myself. Right. But I also knew that if I did get married and had children, that I would really, really want to stay with them. I spent a lot of my childhood in daycare, and it was, I don't know, or at grandparents' houses. I just wasn't home with my parents, So I really wanted something different for my home. And so I made choices that would result in that for me. Now, when our first child was born, I closed my counseling practice, and I have been home with our children ever since. And as our children are getting older, we're already beginning to talk about me getting back into my field of study. I find it, I love psychology. I love counseling, and I really enjoy that as a career. So, we will discuss me getting back into that possibly in the future. So.
Give me a second. I'm trying to pull up all super chat type things to make sure we address
those. I
those.
was going to ask about that if we have any super chats. Well, let me just, while he's doing that, I'll just say thank you so much for your interest in these talks that I've been doing with Stephen, with Radlib over here. It's been fun for me. It's been fun for us as a couple to be able to do this together. And I just really, I hope that some of the things that we've said were not discouraging to you, rather the opposite, that they give you a sense of hope that, with some minor adjustments, maybe major adjustments, depending on who you are and what you've been doing, you can begin to pave the road toward a long-lasting, loving partnership with your spouse. And I can just tell you that, just with regard to us, I haven't been bored with Stephen. I mean, there've been some difficult things that we've dealt with, but I have not been bored. And having children has been delightful, and it's been excruciatingly difficult at times. I mean, it's exhausting, I mean, kids just don't want to sleep, man. Right. But anyway, and they get sick, and you worry, and and
but there's something worse, and that's a life that just feels empty and pointless.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
we don't have that problem.
Right, exactly.
Our life is very full.
Some people are infertile and they're not able to have children together, right. And you can still have a full, loving, amazing partnership. So
right. Yep.
But I think that putting some thought into it, putting some effort into it will help bring about that result easier and better. So.
Okay, Mickey, our friend Mickey says, I have felt lost, having disdain for dating I could not explain for years. It is really encouraging to hear your words, to hear that there indeed might be another way, a way of finding true commitment. Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about marriage, and that courtship is meant to build towards. That's another way of putting it, is you're building towards commitment.
Right.
And that's why I put so much emphasis, speaking to the men, for me in particular, on being the kind of person, becoming a man who, his word is his bond, right? That you have a track record of commitment, So, okay, I don't want to brag on myself, but thinking along those lines, how did I show a track record of commitment before I ever got married, or before we were
recording? Me to tell you, or say it?
I'm going to throw some things out and tell me if it gets you thinking.
Okay.
I worked in ministry with inner city Black children in North St. Louis for 10 years. I would go every Thursday night and pick them up and do a class with them. And they basically grew up with me. It was a group, my class was girls, and I started when they were like ages 7 to 9. And I had co-teachers at different points who came and went, but I stayed consistent for 10 years. So that was a way that I wasn't thinking about this way. I was just trying to serve the Lord, right? But I was building a track record of, I didn't walk away when things got hard with these children who were coming from a really terrible environment, and acted it out sometimes, right? But I stuck by them, and it took them a while. I remember they had so much insecurity because of their situation. It took them years to calm down and to realize that I was just going to be there. I was going to go to Europe for some reason, I remember, and they said, "Are you going to come back?" It was so sad, And I was like, "Yeah, I'm just going on a trip, girls. I'll be back in 2 weeks." It took time to demonstrate to them that I am steady. I do what I say I'm going to do, and just be there and be solid. And that, they gave me the feedback that meant a lot to them. So that's an example of a way in which I was preparing myself to stay committed. I was cultivating the virtue of commitment, without totally outside of this whole thing of dating and stuff. I think that's the point. We think that dating is preparing us for marriage, but actually there's a whole bunch of other things we do and can do that are really better preparations for marriage.
Honestly, choosing a career and getting a job and sticking with it is a perfect way to prepare yourself for marriage.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And some people,
I mean,
we can think of people who cannot stick with a job because they get angry and then they walk off,
or they get bored, or
I'm
not.
Real life involves just, getting through mundane things and dealing with conflict and sticking to it anyway.
Right. Exactly. So, do you want to read anything else?
Giuseppe Cosmo says, "I've grown very bitter over the last 10 years, and your advice gives me a bit of hope. I hope it doesn't backfire into more bitterness. How does one overcome this bitterness?" Well, I don't know the source of your bitterness, but I guess we could guess, right? It's just that, I'm hearing from a lot of young people that the dating scene or whatever is just really rough.
Well,
it's not fun to go out there and look for a mate right now.
I think it's important that you've acknowledged that you have this bitterness, and I think I would highly recommend that you work through that you find someone that you can trust, be it a counselor or just someone in your life that you can be talking to and working through this, because you don't want to bring that baggage with you into a marital relationship. I would suggest that you can use what you know about yourself as a way to clarify what it is that you want from a significant other, and just really, again, like he said, we don't know the source of the bitterness, but to really let that go, let that go.
Okay, and one more slipped in. Sam153 says, "Thank you for the stream. The advice and encouragement is appreciated." Oh, and I guess I'll read the one right under that. "This is an amazing healing gift you guys are giving here." Well, thank you. That's what we wanted to do. I hope you can pick it up in everything I do on this channel, that a thing I have a heart for is encouraging people. I think that there are lots of black pill merchants out there who can give you a gazillion reasons why you should be bummed. And I don't want to be one of those people. I want to be the opposite. I want to give hope, not just by saying pretty words, but by giving really practical, another way of looking at things and information that you might not have heard before, that gives you a new perspective and maybe suggest some new paths for you that aren't such a bummer. Red Hawk, thank you, Red Hawk. I enjoyed listening to you both and enjoyed meeting you at the event. Be well, you two, and blessings to you and your family.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
I thought there were 2 more questions on the thing that you had pulled up.
Nope.
Nope. Okay. That's it.
I'll show you. She's new to the YouTube game here, so I'm showing
okay.
her the
Sorry,
showing her the back.
I'm learning.
So this is from previous streams.
Oh, okay. I see.
Right.
Okay.
So these 4 are from.
Okay.
Anyway.
All right.
You can watch Heather learn about YouTube live. Okay. Well, thanks everyone. I think we did pretty well because we're at 2.5 hours and we were afraid it'd be 5 hours. And
Yeah, we had a wild animal come into our home. I can hear it actually. They caught the bird.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
They put it in a cage.
As we're doing the stream,
They're coming through.
our daughter, who just turned 18 today, comes through with a blue jay in her hand. So
it's making noise in a cage that we had in the garage, and so I guess what we're going to do is take it to the songbird rehabilitation. I'll be doing that first, and then I'll be taking her thrift shopping for her birthday and possibly getting her ears pierced. I don't know. Life is very exciting when you have
yeah. Hey, and worth
children.
noting, it's a little bit of a milestone, right? Our first child turns 18 today,
Yeah.
so that's a milestone for her, but it's a milestone for us, right? It's our first child, sort of being of age, I guess.
Yeah.
Of whatever 18 means legally and all that stuff. So you know, we've been our youngest are 6, so we're not exactly done parenting yet, but
yeah, they're about to be 7. The twins are about to be 7.
Yeah.
And we've got just about every age in between. And
Yep.
man, I'm telling you what, the kids are feeling the spring, because our middle boys, these 3 younger boys, 13, 11, and 9,
Right.
it's like I try to homeschool them, and they're like, it's like a cartoon.
Yeah.
They're like this wrestling ball going
Yeah,
across the living room because they just have so much energy.
Right.
And so usually I get through history and go outside and run it out, you know, run it off, and then we'll do something.
Bounce it off on the trampoline.
Right. Then we'll do another subject, you know. So,
Okay.
Anyway.
Well, thanks everybody. I'll do one last check before we sign off, and I think we're good. Okay. Thanks everybody. Bye.
Bye.